The sky above the Pacific Rim turned an unnatural shade of crimson as molten lava spewed from Mount St. Helens. It had been centuries since the volcano had last erupted, yet here it was again, its fiery wrath splashing against the clouds in a dance of blazing light. Miles away, across the globe, other dormant volcanoes followed suit, as though synchronized in their awakening. Dr. Julian Miras stood by the observation deck in the newly constructed Cascadia Research Base, his eyes glued to the furious display on the horizon. A volcanologist by trade, he had spent his entire life studying Earth's volcanic activity, trying to predict eruptions and understand the planet's most destructive forces. But this was different. "That's the fifth one today," said Captain Michael Hayes, the no-nonsense military commander stationed at the base. His voice was tense. He'd seen combat, but nothing like this. "Are we looking at a planetary catastrophe, Doctor?" Julian didn't answer right away, his mind racing through possible explanations. He had seen eruptions, studied magma chambers, and mapped out faults. None of his models could explain what was happening. The timing was too perfect, the eruptions too widespread. It felt coordinated. "It's not natural," Julian finally muttered, his voice shaking. "Something's controlling them." Captain Hayes furrowed his brow. "What do you mean controlling them? Volcanoes don't just erupt on command." "Exactly," Julian replied. "But they are now." Across the Atlantic, deep in the heart of Africa, the dormant volcano Mount Nyiragongo rumbled to life. Its last eruption had been years ago, but now it roared as though awakened from a deep sleep. Lava poured from its summit, flooding the jungle with molten rock. In the underground facility beneath the Geological Defense Council, Dr. Emil Colomo studied the satellite feeds, watching as the chain reaction spread. One by one, dormant volcanoes worldwide were igniting like fireworks. Panic gripped the cities nearby as people fled in terror. Emil tapped a sequence of keys, bringing up data from the past hours. His screen showed a terrifying trend: over 50 volcanic eruptions, all within a day. "Is this the end?" whispered one of the technicians beside him. Emil shook his head, trying to suppress his own fear. "No," he said softly, "I think it's only the beginning." It wasn't long before the rest of the world took notice. The media scrambled for explanations, and governments issued evacuations. Yet no one had an answer for why the planet seemed to be fighting itself. Then the ships arrived. From the depths of space, sleek and menacing, the Zelkeri fleet descended upon Earth. Their arrival wasn't subtle massive warships the size of continents, bristling with energy weapons and shielded by impenetrable armor. Humanity had known of their existence for years, but had hoped the conflict would never come to their home. The Zelkeri were conquerors, a species of warlike aliens that devoured planets for resources, erasing entire civilizations without mercy. Humanity's defenses, while formidable, were no match for the advanced technology of the Zelkeri. The orbital defenses were destroyed in hours, and soon the invasion began in earnest. Julian watched from the Cascadia base as the first waves of the alien assault hit Earth's cities. They swept through New York, London, and Beijing, laying waste to skyscrapers and sending shockwaves through the world's population. The Zelkeri aimed for dominance, and with each passing hour, their grip on Earth tightened. On the front lines of humanity's last stand, Captain Hayes directed what little remained of the resistance. The military forces had been overwhelmed in the first days of the attack, leaving only a few isolated units scattered across the globe. He had seen firsthand the destruction left in the aliens' wake. Their weapons were like nothing humanity had ever seen: energy beams that melted metal, disintegrated stone, and left charred craters in their wake. His orders were simple: hold the line until reinforcements arrived, if they ever did. As Hayes prepared his men for what felt like a doomed fight, he received a call from Julian. "Captain, you need to see this," Julian said, his voice urgent. Hayes rushed to the observation deck, expecting to hear another report of an eruption or another city falling under alien control. What he saw, though, took his breath away. Mount St. Helens was erupting again, but this time the lava didn't flow down the mountainside. It rose, a massive wave of molten rock suspended in midair. The ash cloud had thickened, and beneath it, glowing streams of lava twisted and curled, as if they were alive, as if something within the earth was controlling them. "What the hell?" Hayes muttered, stepping closer to the window. "I told you," Julian said, barely able to contain his own shock. "They're responding to the invasion. It's like the earth itself is fighting back." Suddenly, the comms crackled to life. A report came in. Alien ships had been sighted above the Pacific. Their target? Seattle. In a matter of hours, the alien armada reached the western coast of North America. People huddled in bunkers, hoping the invaders would pass them by. But the Zelkiri were thorough. They razed entire towns, leaving nothing but smoldering ruins in their wake. Just as the first wave of ships crossed into Washington state, the ground trembled. Mount Rainier, quiet for centuries, erupted with a violent surge of molten rock and fire. But this eruption was unlike any other. Instead of flowing harmlessly into the valleys below, the lava surged upward, forming a massive wall of fire between the alien ships and the city. The Zelkiri hesitated for the first time in their campaign. Their scans showed no life signs within the volcano, but something was wrong. Their instruments couldn't explain what they were seeing. The ships fired. Energy beams streaked through the sky, aimed at the molten barrier, but the lava absorbed the hits, rippling as though it were alive. Then, the retaliation came. Lava surged outward, striking the nearest alien ship with a force of 1,000 explosions. The ship's hull buckled under the heat, and within moments it disintegrated, crashing into the sea below. The other ships scrambled to retreat, but the lava followed, twisting through the air like a serpent, hunting them down one by one. In the midst of this chaos, Julian stood frozen at the observation deck, watching as the impossible unfolded before his eyes. Earth's volcanoes, its most destructive force, had come alive, and they weren't just erupting, they were defending humanity. Captain Hayes, still processing the surreal scene unfolding before him, turned to Julian. "Is this happening all over the world?" Julian nodded slowly. "It's not just here. Reports are coming in from South America, Africa, Asia. Wherever the Zelkiri go, the volcanoes rise up to meet them." "Why now?" Hayes asked. "Why are the volcanoes responding to them and not us?" Julian glanced at the maps spread out on the table, detailing the global eruptions. "I don't know yet, but we need to find out. Fast." The answer, Julian feared, lay deep within the Earth itself, in a mystery far older than humanity, and if they couldn't unlock it, this unexpected defense might not be enough to stop the Zelkiri from destroying them all. Far beneath the surface of Mount St. Helens, Julian Miras descended into the dark, oppressive belly of the Earth. The tunnels that led to the volcano's core were a labyrinth of hot, twisting pathways, but Julian pushed forward, driven by a strange sense of urgency. Something had called to him from the depths. It wasn't just the scientist in him. It was something primal, an instinct he couldn't ignore. Behind him, Captain Hayes and a squad of soldiers followed, their faces tense in the glow of the lava-lit caverns. The air grew thick with heat, and the ever-present rumble of the volcano made every step feel like they were treading on the edge of an eruption. "This doesn't feel like a good idea," one of the soldiers muttered. "It's not," Hayes replied, his voice firm. "But we don't have a choice. If what Julian's saying is true, we need to understand why these volcanoes are doing what they're doing. This could be our only shot at survival." Julian glanced back at the captain, grateful for his support. "We're close," he said, his voice hoarse from the heat. "The sensors I left down here weeks ago, there's been a massive surge in geothermal energy, but I'm picking up something else, something different." "What do you mean different?" Hayes asked. Julian hesitated. "There's a frequency, a signal of sorts, coming from deep within the magma. It's almost as if the Earth itself is communicating." They reached a large cavern, the walls shimmering with molten rock. At its center stood an ancient stone structure, partially submerged in lava. Julian stopped, his eyes widening in shock. He had seen pictures of similar structures in ancient text, but never one in person. It was impossible. "What is this?" Hayes asked, stepping forward to inspect the structure. Julian knelt beside it, brushing ash from the stone surface. I don't know, but it's old. Older than human civilization, maybe older than the planet itself." Suddenly, the ground trembled. The volcano roared with a violent surge of energy, and the air crackled with an otherworldly hum. Julian's instruments began to go haywire. The readings were off the charts. "Move back," Hayes ordered, his hand instinctively gripping his weapon as the structure began to glow with an eerie red light. Lava churned around them, but it didn't pour into the cavern. It hovered in the air, swirling in strange patterns, almost as if it were alive. "That signal," Julian whispered. "It's getting stronger." Hayes looked at him, confused. "What signal?" Before Julian could answer, the lava in the center of the cavern suddenly erupted upward, forming a massive column of fire and molten rock. The soldiers scrambled back as the column expanded, taking on a vaguely humanoid shape, a figure of pure molten energy, towering over them all. Its form was indistinct, a swirling mass of lava and ash, but there was no mistaking the intelligence in its glowing eyes. For a moment, no one moved. The soldiers raised their weapons, but Hayes held up a hand, signaling them to wait. He wasn't sure what this was, but one thing was clear: this wasn't an enemy. The molten figure shifted, its molten arms extending as though beckoning them closer. Its voice, when it came, was a deep rumble that reverberated through the earth itself. "You have come," it said, the words echoing in their minds rather than their ears. Julian's heart raced. He stepped forward, against every instinct in his body. What are you?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I am what you call the Earth," the figure responded, its glowing eyes fixed on Julian. "I have existed long before your kind, and I will exist long after." "Why now?" Hayes demanded, stepping beside Julian. "Why are you defending us against the Zelkeri?" The figure's molten face twisted, almost as if in contemplation. "The invaders threaten more than your species. They threaten the balance. The Earth is not simply a world. It is a force, a consciousness that has watched over its creations for eons." Julian was speechless. The idea of Earth as a living entity, a sentient force, was beyond anything he had ever imagined. And yet, here it stood before him, alive, communicating. Hayes wasn't so easily swayed. "If you've been watching for eons, why wait until now? Why not act sooner?" The figure's molten form shimmered. "Your kind has been given the freedom to grow, to learn. I do not interfere in the natural course of life. But now, these invaders seek to unmake what has been forged over millennia. They threaten not just you, but the very existence of this world." Julian swallowed hard, trying to piece it all together. "So, you're fighting for us?" "For the balance," the figure corrected. "The Earth is a guardian. It will protect itself and those who live in harmony with it. But the invaders disrupt this harmony. They seek to strip the Earth of its essence, to drain its life force for their own ends, that I cannot allow." Meanwhile, high above, the Zelkeri forces were struggling. The volcanic eruptions had become more frequent, and their technology was proving ineffective against the molten onslaught. Their ships were equipped to handle planetary defenses, but nothing had prepared them for this. Energy beams were absorbed by the lava, and any attempt to land ground forces was met with torrents of fire and ash. Commander Thal, the leader of the Zelkeri invasion, slammed his fist into the console as yet another ship was destroyed. He couldn't understand it. Earth was supposed to be a primitive planet, its defenses negligible. And yet here they were, losing ship after ship to an uncontrollable force of nature. "Sir, the volcanic activity is spreading," one of his officers reported, his voice laced with fear. "It's almost as if the planet itself is attacking us." Thal's eyes narrowed. "Then we target the source." The officer hesitated. "The source?" Thal turned toward the viewports, glaring down at the blue-green planet below. "Every planet has a heart. Find it and destroy it." Back beneath Mount St. Helens, Julian, and Hayes continued their conversation with the molten figure. "How do we stop them?" Julian asked. "If they're coming for the Earth's heart, what can we do?" The figure's eyes burned brighter. "The invaders will seek to destroy me, to destroy the core of this world. But they do not understand the power they face. The Earth is not just rock and magma, it is life itself. To destroy me would be to unmake all life." Hayes looked grim. "That doesn't mean they won't try." Julian's mind raced. "There has to be a way to stop them. We can't just stand by while they—" "There is a way," the figure interrupted, its voice rumbling like an earthquake. "But it will require great sacrifice." Julian's heart sank. He had feared this. "What kind of sacrifice?" The figure's form flickered, the heat in the cavern intensifying. "To protect the Earth, you must merge with its essence. Only then can you command its full power." Hayes stepped forward, his face set in determination. "You mean someone has to become part of the Earth?" The figure nodded slowly. "Only one of your kind can bridge the gap between humanity and the Earth's power. Only one can wield the force of the volcanoes against the invaders." Julian looked to Hayes, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. "But what happens to the one who merges?" The figure was silent for a moment before responding. "They will no longer be human. They will become something more, something eternal. But their life, as they know it, will end." The weight of the figure's words pressed down on Julian like a collapsing mountain. He had imagined many things in his lifetime, pushing the boundaries of science, solving the mysteries of the Earth, but nothing had prepared him for this. The thought of merging with the essence of the planet was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Julian's gaze flicked to Captain Hayes, whose face was unreadable. For a man who had led soldiers into battle, who had fought wars and seen the worst humanity had to offer, even this was beyond his realm of understanding. "This merging," Hayes began cautiously, "it's not something you can just volunteer for, is it?" The molten figure's eyes seemed to dim slightly, as though considering the question. "No, the Earth must choose. Only one whose heart is aligned with the planet's can undertake the merge. It is not a burden to be taken lightly." Julian swallowed, his mouth dry. "And if the Earth doesn't choose anyone, what happens then?" The figure's fiery form shifted, as if with sadness. "Then the invaders will destroy me, and with me, your world." The air in the cavern was thick with the weight of the decision that hung over them. Julian felt the heat rising, the rumble of the Earth beneath his feet growing more intense. The alien ships above continued their relentless assault, yet it was clear that the Earth's volcanic defenses were losing strength. The Zelkiri were adapting. "We can't wait," Hayes said finally, his voice hard. "If we don't act now, there won't be anything left to save." Julian nodded, feeling the same urgency. But even as he processed the enormity of the situation, a nagging thought gnawed at him. Why hadn't the Earth chosen already? If it had the power to communicate, to protect itself, surely it would have acted by now. "Why me?" Julian blurted out, surprising even himself. He had to ask. "Why us? We're just scientists, soldiers. Why do we matter to something as ancient as you?" The molten figure turned its gaze directly to Julian, its eyes burning brighter. "You do not yet understand, child of the Earth. This planet has nurtured you, watched over you. You are not separate from it, you are part of it. Every being that walks this world is bound to its essence. But you have the mind of a creator, a thinker. You seek understanding. It is in those who seek knowledge, who strive to protect life, that the Earth's power is strongest." Julian felt a strange sense of warmth wash over him, not from the heat of the volcano, but from the figure's words. Was this why he had always been drawn to the mysteries of the planet? Was this why he had felt an unexplainable connection to the Earth all his life? Julian hesitated, the reality of the choice sinking in. "I don't know if I'm ready for this." Hayes placed a firm hand on his shoulder, grounding him. "No one ever is." The ground trembled violently, and from above, the cavern ceiling began to crack, debris falling as the distant roar of the alien ships grew louder. They were getting closer, pushing their way through the molten defenses. "There's no time left," Hayes said urgently. "We have to do this now." Julian's mind raced, but deep down, he knew the choice had already been made. He had devoted his life to understanding the Earth, to protecting it from harm. If there was any chance that he could save humanity, this was it. "I'll do it," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "I'll merge with the Earth." The molten figure nodded, its form pulsing with energy. "Very well. The Earth has chosen." In the Zelkeri command ship, Commander Thal watched with cold, calculating eyes as the alien fleet continued its relentless bombardment. Though their initial attempts had been thwarted by the volcanic eruptions, they had quickly adapted their tactics. Energy fields had been deployed to contain the molten lava, and precision strikes were beginning to wear down Earth's defenses. "We've pinpointed the location of the strongest geothermal activity, Commander," an officer reported, pulling up a holographic map of Earth. "It's centered around Mount St. Helens in North America. Our scans show an unusual energy signature coming from beneath the surface." Thal's eyes narrowed. "That's where we strike." Julian stood in the center of the cavern, his heart pounding in his chest. The air crackled with energy as the molten figure extended its hand toward him. Lava began to swirl around his feet, and a deep, rhythmic hum filled the air. It was as if the Earth itself was singing, calling out to him. "Do not fear," the figure said. "The merge will be painful, but through it, you will gain the power to protect all that you love." Julian nodded, steeling himself. He had no idea what to expect, but there was no turning back now. He glanced at Hayes one last time, the captain's stern face showing a rare flicker of emotion. "Good luck, Julian," Hayes said quietly. The lava surged upward, enveloping Julian in a column of molten fire. He gasped as the heat washed over him, but instead of burning, it seemed to merge with his skin, sinking into his very bones. His body felt like it was being torn apart and rebuilt all at once, the energy of the Earth flooding every cell. The pain was unbearable. Julian's vision blurred, and he screamed, his voice drowned out by the roar of the volcano. But even through the agony, he could feel something else, something ancient, something powerful. It was the Earth itself, its consciousness merging with his own, filling him with knowledge, with understanding. His mind expanded, reaching out across the globe. He could feel the pulse of the planet, the tectonic plates shifting, the molten core churning. He could sense the invaders, their ships carving through the atmosphere, their weapons aimed at the heart of the Earth. And he could feel the volcanoes, their raw, untapped power, waiting to be unleashed. Above, the Zelkeri fleet began its final assault. Energy beams tore through the atmosphere, targeting the core of Mount St. Helens. The Earth trembled under the strain, the volcanic defenses weakening. Inside the command ship, Commander Thal watched as the surface of the planet began to crack under the relentless assault. Victory was close. He could taste it. "Prepare to fire the main cannon," Thal ordered, his voice filled with cold triumph. "We end this now." But just as the energy cannon charged, something strange happened. The volcanoes around the globe, which had been sputtering and weakening, suddenly flared to life once more, stronger, more violent than ever before. Lava erupted in towering columns, and the ground split open, sending shockwaves rippling across the planet. The Zelkeri ships wavered, their sensors going haywire. The power readings from the planet were off the charts, far beyond anything they had anticipated. "Commander, the energy levels are—" an officer started, but Thal cut him off. "Fire, now." The cannon fired, a beam of concentrated energy hurtling toward the Earth's surface. But before it could strike, a massive wall of molten rock surged upward, intercepting the beam. The energy collided with the lava, sending a shockwave through the atmosphere. The Zelkeri ship shuddered as the feedback from the failed strike overloaded their systems. And then the Earth struck back. The ground beneath Mount St. Helens exploded, not in a chaotic burst of fire and ash, but in a controlled, precise attack. Streams of molten rock shot upward, snaking through the sky with terrifying speed. They slammed into the Zelkeri ships, tearing through their hulls like they were made of paper. Julian knew the Earth guided the lava with pinpoint accuracy, directing the molten fury of the planet against its invaders. One by one, the ships fell from the sky, their once impenetrable armor melting away under the onslaught. Commander Thal's disbelief turned to fury as the Zelkeri fleet began to fall apart. The core ship's control panels sparked wildly, overwhelmed by the sheer power of the Earth's counterattack. His officers scrambled to stabilize the systems, but it was too late. Every move the fleet made was met with volcanic precision. It was as though the planet itself was hunting them, striking with calculated ferocity. "How is this possible?" Thal growled, his claws digging into the armrest of his command chair. His mind raced, but no tactical maneuver could explain what he was witnessing. "Commander," a panicked voice called from the communication station. "Our ground forces are being decimated. The volcanoes, they're targeting us. It's as if the lava knows where we are." Thal's jaw clenched. The Zelkeri were the galaxy's most advanced and ruthless conquerors. No planet had ever resisted their onslaught like this. And yet, here they were, being routed by a force they couldn't understand, much less defeat. "What do we do, sir?" another officer asked, his voice shaking. Thal's eyes blazed with determination. "Retreat is not an option," he spat. "We finish this." He turned toward his remaining ships, most of them now battered and crippled by the relentless attacks. But his pride and his thirst for victory was too great to abandon the mission now. "Prepare the atmospheric bombs," Thal ordered, his voice low and menacing. "If we can't break the planet's defenses, we'll burn the entire atmosphere." Far below, in the molten depths of Mount St. Helens, Julian's consciousness had expanded beyond anything he could have ever imagined. He was no longer just a man, he was part of the Earth itself. Every tremor, every shift in the tectonic plates, every pulse of molten magma was as familiar to him as his own heartbeat. But with that power came an overwhelming responsibility. He could feel the Zelkeri's desperation growing as their ships fell from the sky. He could sense the fear in their ranks. But they weren't finished, yet he knew that much. The Earth's voice echoed in his mind, ancient and wise. "They will destroy all if we do not act." Julian understood. The Zelkeri wouldn't stop. Even as their fleet crumbled, they would turn to more desperate measures that could not only destroy the Earth, but wipe out all life on the planet. He reached out with his new awareness, sensing the movement of the Zelkeri ships. He could feel the shift in their energy signatures, the sudden buildup of power in their atmosphere-clearing bombs. These weren't conventional weapons. If deployed, they would burn through the planet's oxygen-rich atmosphere, incinerating everything in their path. "No," Julian whispered, his voice merging with the Earth's rumbling tones. "I won't let them." Above the clouds, Commander Thal's main ship hovered, preparing to launch the atmospheric bombs. The ship's crew worked frantically, knowing they had little time left before the planet's volcanic defenses would target them once more. "Bombs are ready, sir," the weapons officer reported. "On your command." Thal stood, his eyes glowing with a vicious anticipation. "Deploy the bombs. Let the Earth burn." Just as the order was given, a shockwave rippled through the sky. The Zelkeri officers froze as their screens lit up with warnings. Something massive was approaching something from below. Before they could react, the ground beneath them erupted in a column of molten fire, piercing through the atmosphere like a living, sentient force. The lava snaked upward, faster than any of their sensors could track, and slammed into the ship's underbelly. The Zelkeri screamed as the molten rock tore through their hull. Thal barely had time to grab onto the railing as the ship lurched violently. The heat was unbearable, the alarms deafening, and all around him, the once mighty vessel crumbled into chaos. On the ground, Captain Hayes and his team stood outside the Cascadia research base, watching in awe as the volcanic eruptions continued to annihilate the alien forces. The sky was a violent blend of fire and smoke, and every few minutes, another Zelkeri ship fell in a blazing heap toward the Earth. "This is insane," one of the soldiers muttered, his voice filled with awe and terror. "It's like the Earth is fighting back." Hayes stood silent, his eyes fixed on the destruction above. He couldn't fully comprehend what he was seeing. How could anyone? The idea that the planet itself had come alive to defend humanity was beyond anything he had ever imagined. And yet, here they were, witnessing the impossible. He glanced toward the research base, where Julian had descended into the volcanic caverns hours ago. The scientist had insisted that there was something more to the eruptions, something that connected humanity to the planet in a way they didn't fully understand. And now, it seemed that Julian had been right. But Hayes couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't out of danger yet. The Zelkeri were a ruthless species. They wouldn't simply give up. They would strike back, harder and more desperately than before. "What's our status?" Hayes asked, turning to one of his men. "We've lost contact with several cities," the soldier replied grimly. "But the major population centers are still holding on. The volcanic defenses seem to be targeting the largest concentrations of alien forces." Hayes nodded, but his unease grew. He had spent years in the military, fighting enemies who would stop at nothing to win. The Zelkeri would be no different. He could feel it in his gut. This wasn't over yet. Within the core of Mount St. Helens, Julian's mind raced. He could feel the Zelkeri's final gambit, the atmospheric bombs on the verge of being deployed. If they succeeded, the planet's atmosphere would be ignited, burning away the very air that humanity depended on. "No," Julian whispered again, reaching out with his newfound connection to the Earth. He could sense the network of volcanoes across the planet, their power coursing through him like a lifeline. He had to act now. The Earth's voice surged through him, guiding his thoughts. Channel the power of the core. Unleash the full force of the planet. Julian focused, drawing on the raw, untapped energy deep within the Earth's molten core. He could feel the heat, the pressure, the unimaginable power that lay beneath the surface. It was a power that had remained dormant for millennia until now. With a surge of determination, Julian directed that power toward the Zelkeri's atmospheric bombs. The Earth's core responded to his command, sending a wave of molten energy through the planet's crust. Across the globe, dormant volcanoes erupted with renewed ferocity, their lava flows converging toward the alien ships. The Zelkeri had no time to react. The molten rock surged upward, consuming the bombs before they could be deployed. The alien ships buckled under the force of the attack, their hulls melting away as the lava tore through them. On the Zelkeri command ship, Commander Thal watched in horror as his fleet was decimated. His once invincible armada was now nothing more than a collection of burning wrecks, falling helplessly toward the planet's surface. "Impossible," Thal muttered, his voice filled with disbelief. How could this happen? He slammed his fist into the console, his rage boiling over. "Retreat, all ships, retreat." But it was too late. The molten fury of the Earth had already claimed them. As the last of the Zelkeri ships fell, the sky above the Pacific Rim finally began to clear. The eruptions slowed, the lava receding back into the Earth. The once violent volcanic activity had subsided, leaving behind a planet that, though scarred, had survived. In the depths of Mount St. Helens, Julian's consciousness began to settle. The Earth's voice, once loud and overwhelming, now softened to a whisper. He had done it. He had saved humanity. But as the power of the Earth slowly receded from his body, Julian realized that something had changed. He was no longer just a man, he was something more, something eternal. He could feel the Earth's pulse in his veins, the molten core of the planet beating in time with his own heart. He was one with the Earth now. Captain Hayes stood on the observation deck, his eyes scanning the horizon. The fires had died down, and the ash cloud was beginning to dissipate. The world had been pushed to the brink of destruction, but somehow they had survived. "Sir," one of the soldiers called out, pointing toward the base. "Look." Hayes turned and saw Julian emerging from the entrance of the cavern. But he was different. His eyes glowed with a fiery intensity, and his skin seemed to shimmer with the heat of the Earth itself. "Julian," Hayes called out, his voice uncertain. Julian smiled, though it was a strange, distant smile. "It's done," he said, his voice carrying the weight of the Earth's ancient power. "The Zelkiri are gone." Hayes approached cautiously, unsure of what to make of the man standing before him. "Are you? Still you?" Julian's smile faded slightly, and he looked out at the horizon. "I'm still me, but I'm also something more now." Hayes nodded slowly, understanding dawning on him. "So what happens next?" Julian looked up at the sky, the ash clouds parting to reveal the blue expanse beyond. For the first time in days, there was no sign of the alien ships, no looming threat hanging over the planet. The Zelkiri were truly gone. But something in his new consciousness told him this was only the beginning. "What happens next?" Julian repeated Hayes' question, his voice distant. "Humanity rebuilds. The Earth will heal, but we must remain vigilant." Hayes studied him, noticing the slight tremor in Julian's voice. He had seen men change in battle, but this was something beyond comprehension. Julian wasn't just a man anymore. He had become something greater, something bound to the planet itself. "You're staying with us, right?" Hayes asked, concern creeping into his tone. "You're still on our side." Julian's glowing eyes met his, and for a moment there was silence. Then, with a faint smile, Julian replied, "I'll always be with humanity, Hayes. But I don't think I'll stay in one place. There's too much of the Earth to understand now, too much to protect." Hayes swallowed, trying to process what Julian had become. "So, what, you're some kind of guardian now?" Julian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he knelt down and placed his hand on the rocky ground beneath him. A surge of energy pulsed through him, and he felt the deep, rhythmic heartbeat of the planet. The Earth was alive in ways humanity had never truly understood, and now it was his responsibility to ensure its protection. "Maybe," Julian finally said, rising to his feet, "a guardian, a steward, whatever you want to call it. But there's one thing I know for sure. The Earth won't allow another invasion. Not after this." Hayes nodded, his respect for Julian deepening. "We'll make sure of that." Julian's expression shifted, becoming more serious. "There's something else, Hayes. The Zelkiri weren't just after resources. They knew something about the Earth's power, something ancient. They were trying to tap into it." Hayes frowned. "You think there's more to this?" "I don't just think," Julian said. "I know. The Zelkiri weren't the first to come for the Earth, and they won't be the last." Far away, deep in the forgotten regions of the galaxy, a shadowy figure watched from a darkened throne room. The defeat of the Zelkiri had been unexpected, but not entirely surprising. The Earth, after all, was no ordinary planet. It was one of the last surviving strongholds of a power long thought to be lost in ancient force that predated most civilizations in the galaxy. The figure leaned forward, its eyes narrowing. The Zelkiri had underestimated the humans and the planet they inhabited, but others would not make the same mistake. "The Earth's defenses have awakened," the figure murmured, its voice echoing through the empty chamber. "This changes everything." With a wave of its hand, the figure activated a holomap, displaying the planet Earth in all its glory. A cold smile spread across its face. "It's only a matter of time," it whispered. "The galaxy will come for them." Julian stood alone on the peak of Mount St. Helens, watching as the sun set over the horizon. The air was thick with ash, but there was a strange beauty in the devastation. The Earth had defended itself in ways no one had ever imagined, and now it was healing, rebuilding, just as humanity would. As he gazed out over the landscape, Julian felt the pulse of the Earth beneath his feet. It was a comforting presence, one that reminded him he was never truly alone. The power of the planet flowed through him, and with it came knowledge ancient, vast, and still unfolding. He could sense the tectonic plates shifting far below, the molten core churning with energy, the magma that coursed through the planet like blood in a body. But more than that, he could sense the universe beyond. The stars were no longer distant and unreachable. They were part of the same vast system that connected him to the Earth. And somewhere out there, he knew, other eyes were watching. Other forces were gathering. The Zelkiri had been the first to strike, but they wouldn't be the last. Earth's power had drawn attention, dangerous attention. But this time, Julian would be ready. The Earth had chosen him as its protector, and he wouldn't fail. Captain Hayes and his team stood at the base of the volcano, waiting for Julian's return. The soldiers were quiet, their expressions a mixture of awe and disbelief. They had seen battles, fought against impossible odds, but nothing compared to what they had witnessed today. As Hayes waited, his thoughts drifted to the future. The Zelkiri had been defeated, but the cost had been high. Cities lay in ruins, countless lives had been lost, and the planet's surface had been scarred by the volcanic eruptions. Rebuilding would take years, decades, even. But they had survived. And as long as they had people like Julian, people willing to sacrifice everything for the greater good, humanity would continue to survive. A flicker of movement caught Hayes' attention, and he turned to see Julian walking toward them, his steps slow and deliberate. The glow in his eyes had dimmed slightly, but there was still something otherworldly about him, something that set him apart from the rest of them. "Ready to head back?" Hayes asked, his tone casual, though he couldn't help but feel a twinge of apprehension. Julian smiled faintly. "Not quite yet. There's still work to be done." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "More work? I'd say you've done enough for one day." Julian shook his head. "The Earth may have defended itself, but the scars remain. I can feel them, the wounds, the damage. The planet needs time to heal, and so does humanity." Hayes nodded slowly. "And you're going to help with that?" Julian's expression grew serious. "I'll do what I can, but there's something you need to understand, Hayes. The Zelkiri weren't the end. There are other forces out there, forces that are far more dangerous. Earth's power has been awakened, and it's drawn attention." Hayes felt a chill run down his spine. "You think they'll come for us again?" Julian's gaze drifted to the horizon, where the sky was darkening with the approach of night. "They will, and we'll be ready." As the days passed, the world began to rebuild. The volcanic eruptions had stopped, the alien ships had been reduced to smoldering wreckage, and the survivors emerged from their shelters to find a changed planet. The devastation was immense, but so was the resilience of humanity. Across the globe, people worked together to restore what had been lost. The cities that had been destroyed were rebuilt, the ash-covered landscapes were cleared, and life slowly began to return to normal. But the memory of the Zelkiri invasion and the strange, impossible defense of the Earth remained etched in the minds of every human. Julian traveled across the planet, drawn by the Earth's pulse. Everywhere he went, he could feel the planet's power coursing through him, guiding him, helping him restore the balance that had been disrupted by the invasion. He became a legend, a figure whispered about in the halls of government, in the streets of cities, in the quiet corners of villages. Some called him the Earth's guardian. Others simply referred to him as the Man of Lava. But no matter what they called him, one thing was certain: Julian Miras was no longer just a man. He had become part of the Earth itself. And as the world healed, so did its protector. But deep in his heart, Julian knew that this peace was only temporary. The galaxy was vast, and Earth's power had not gone unnoticed. There would be more challenges, more threats. But this time, humanity wouldn't face them alone. Because the Earth had awakened, and it would defend its children once more. In the weeks following the Zelkiri defeat, Earth began to heal. The skies cleared, the ash settled, and humanity, as it always had, picked up the pieces and moved forward. Cities rebuilt themselves in the wake of the devastation, but the stories of the strange alliance between Earth's volcanic fury and one man, Julian Miras, spread like wildfire. Julian had become a living legend, though he rarely stayed in one place long enough to see the awe in people's eyes. His connection to the Earth was growing stronger, and with that connection came an overwhelming sense of duty. He could feel the energy of the planet surging through him, guiding him to places where his presence was needed the most. On a remote island in the Pacific, where ancient volcanic activity had scarred the land, Julian stood atop a cliff, his eyes closed as he connected with the earth below. The dormant volcano beneath his feet rumbled gently, as if acknowledging his presence. He could feel the land's memories, its history, and the energy that lay beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to awaken. A gust of wind swept across the island, rustling the palm trees behind him. Julian opened his eyes and took a deep breath, allowing the rhythm of the earth to guide him. He had traveled far, sensing disturbances in the planet's core that he hadn't felt before. Though the Zelkiri threat had been neutralized, something deeper lingered, something far older than the invaders. Suddenly, a voice crackled through his comm device. "Julian, do you copy?" It was Hayes. Julian tapped his ear. "I'm here. What's the situation?" "We've been tracking some unusual seismic activity near the Atlantic Ridge," Hayes said. His voice was steady, but Julian could hear the concern. "It doesn't match any of the known fault lines, and it's growing stronger. We think it might be connected to whatever it is you've been feeling." Julian frowned, his senses heightened. "I've been feeling a disturbance, but I thought it was just residual energy from the eruptions. It's more than that?" "Yeah," Hayes replied. "It's spreading. We're getting reports of strange electromagnetic readings across the globe, and the geological patterns don't add up. It's almost as if something is moving beneath the Earth's crust." Julian's heart quickened. "I'll check it out." "Good," Hayes said. "And Julian, be careful. Whatever this is, it doesn't feel right." Julian made his way to the Atlantic Ridge, the vast underwater mountain range that stretched across the ocean floor. Using the Earth's energy as his guide, he descended into the deep, the pressure of the ocean bearing down on him as he ventured closer to the disturbance. The further he went, the more uneasy he felt. The energy pulsing through the earth was unlike anything he had encountered before. It was ancient, raw, and incredibly powerful. He reached the ocean floor, the volcanic activity here quiet for centuries. But there was something else, something lurking beneath the surface, waiting to emerge. Julian placed his hand on the seabed, focusing his energy. The Earth's voice hummed through him, guiding him toward the source of the disturbance. As he connected with the planet's core, images flooded his mind, ancient civilizations, long before humanity had walked the Earth, and a power that had once been dormant, now stirring to life. Suddenly, the ground beneath him began to tremble. The volcanic ridge shook violently, and a massive fissure opened up in the seabed. Lava erupted from the crack, sending plumes of superheated water and molten rock into the ocean. But it wasn't just the volcanic activity that alarmed Julian. There was something else emerging from the fissure. A shape, dark and massive, rose from the depths. It wasn't lava, nor was it any kind of geological formation he had ever seen. It was alive. Julian stepped back, his heart pounding as the creature emerged fully from the fissure. It was an enormous, serpent-like being, its scales glistening with molten energy. Its eyes burned with the same intensity as the Earth's core. And as it uncoiled itself from the fissure, Julian could feel the overwhelming power radiating from it. This was no ordinary creature. It was ancient, older than the Zelkiri, older than human history. It had been buried deep within the earth for eons, trapped beneath the volcanic ridges, waiting for its moment to rise. The serpent-like entity stared at Julian, its eyes glowing with a malevolent intelligence. Julian could feel its mind probing his own, searching for something, perhaps recognizing the connection he had with the earth. "You should not have come," the creature's voice echoed in his mind, a deep, rumbling tone that made the ground tremble. Julian's jaw clenched. "What are you?" "I am the first," the creature replied. "The one who was here before your kind, before the earth's surface bore life. I am the guardian of the ancient forces that have slept beneath this world, and now I have awakened." Julian's mind raced. He had felt the Earth's call, the warning signs of something brewing beneath the surface, but he had never imagined it would be something like this, an entity as old as the planet itself. "What do you want?" Julian asked, standing his ground despite the overwhelming presence of the creature. The serpent's eyes narrowed. "The balance has been disturbed. Your kind has awakened forces beyond your comprehension. The Zelkari were but the beginning. The Earth's power is not to be wielded lightly." Julian felt the weight of those words. The Zelkari had come to Earth seeking its resources, its raw energy, and in doing so, they had triggered something much darker and older. The Earth's volcanic defense had been a response, but it had also stirred this ancient force. "Then help us," Julian said. "If you care about the balance, help us protect the Earth." The creature hissed, its molten form writhing with energy. "You misunderstand, child of the Earth. I am not here to protect your world. I am here to restore the balance, and if that means erasing your kind, so be it." Julian's heart sank. The creature wasn't an ally. It was a force of nature, driven by a primal need to maintain equilibrium, even if it meant wiping out humanity in the process. He took a step back, feeling the Earth's energy surge through him. He wasn't just a man anymore, he was a conduit for the planet's power, and he would not allow this ancient being to destroy everything he had fought to protect. "If you want to destroy us," Julian said, his voice steady, "you'll have to go through me first." The creature's eyes glowed with fury. "So be it." Above the Atlantic, Captain Hayes and his team watched in horror as the ocean began to churn violently. Massive waves crashed against the shore, and the sky darkened with ash and smoke. The volcanic activity beneath the ocean was growing more intense, and whatever was causing it was beyond their control. "We've got to get him out of there," one of the soldiers said, his voice filled with panic. "He's going to get himself killed." Hayes stared at the horizon, his mind racing. Julian had gone into the depths alone, following a disturbance he hadn't fully understood. Now the entire region was destabilizing, and they had no way of reaching him. But Hayes knew Julian. He knew the man wasn't just a scientist anymore, he was something more. And if anyone could stop whatever was happening beneath the surface, it was him. "We wait," Hayes said quietly, his fist clenched. "We wait for him." In the depths of the ocean, Julian stood face to face with the ancient serpent. The ground trembled beneath them as the Earth's molten core roared in response to the conflict. Julian closed his eyes, reaching deep within himself, channeling the power of the Earth. He could feel the planet's core, its energy waiting for him to unleash it. He wasn't just a man anymore, he was the Earth's protector, its guardian, and he would not allow this ancient force to bring humanity to its knees. With a deep breath, Julian opened his eyes, and the battle for Earth's future began. The ocean floor groaned beneath the enormous weight of the conflict brewing between Julian and the ancient serpent. Volcanic vents opened all around them, spewing molten lava into the water, heating the surrounding sea to near boiling temperatures. The creature towered over him, its colossal form writhing with molten energy that rivaled the planet's core itself. Julian's connection to the Earth was his only defense. His entire body hummed with the power of the planet's molten heart. But the serpent, this primal being, was an embodiment of forces older than the Earth's surface life. It wasn't just a creature, it was a guardian of ancient, forgotten energies, and it had risen to challenge the disruption that had rippled through the Earth's core. The creature struck first, whipping its molten tail toward Julian with terrifying speed. The force of the blow sent shockwaves through the water, causing nearby volcanic vents to erupt violently. Julian raised his arms instinctively, summoning the Earth's energy to form a protective barrier around him. The serpent's tail hit the barrier with a resounding crash, sending a ripple of force through Julian's entire body. "You cannot stop me," the serpent growled, its voice rumbling through Julian's mind. "You are a child of this world, but I am its firstborn. The Earth itself bows to my will." Julian's muscles tensed as he struggled to maintain the barrier. His mind raced, searching for a way to counter the creature's overwhelming power. He couldn't match it in raw strength. The serpent's connection to the Earth's ancient energies was too deep. But there had to be a way, something the creature hadn't anticipated. He closed his eyes, reaching deeper into the Earth's core. He had learned much since merging with the planet's energy, but there were still forces within the Earth that remained untapped, ancient knowledge that he hadn't yet unlocked. If he could access that power, even briefly, It might be enough to turn the tide. The serpent reared back, preparing for another strike. This time, it lunged forward, its molten jaws open wide, aiming to crush Julian in one swift motion. But Julian was ready. He dropped the barrier and instead called upon the Earth's energy to surround him, creating a swirling vortex of molten rock and magma. The serpent's jaws clamped down on the vortex, but the molten energy exploded outward, forcing the creature to recoil in surprise. Julian seized the moment, directing the molten vortex toward the serpent's core. The creature roared in anger as the molten energy collided with its massive body, sending ripples of molten rock cascading through the ocean floor. The impact was enough to push the serpent back, but not enough to defeat it. "You are foolish to think you can defeat me," the serpent hissed. "I have existed for millennia. I have watched over this world long before your kind emerged from the dust." Julian gritted his teeth, his mind racing. He couldn't rely on brute force alone. The serpent had too much power, too much experience. But there was something the creature had overlooked, something that Julian had learned since merging with the Earth's energy. The balance it sought to restore wasn't just about power, it was about harmony. The Earth's core wasn't a force to be dominated. It was a force to be understood, to be in tune with. The serpent had existed as a guardian of ancient energies, but it had never embraced the Earth's evolution, its natural cycles, and its connection to life. That was where Julian's strength lay, in his understanding of the Earth as both a destructive and nurturing force, capable of more than just raw power. "I'm not here to defeat you," Julian said, his voice echoing with the Earth's energy. "I'm here to restore the balance, and that means more than just keeping the old ways alive." The serpent paused, its molten eyes narrowing. "What are you saying, human?" Julian stepped forward, his connection to the Earth deepening with every moment. "The Earth has changed since you last walked its surface. It's not just the raw energy beneath the crust that matters. It's the life above it. Humanity, nature, the balance between destruction and creation. You don't understand that anymore, do you?" The serpent snarled, but there was hesitation in its gaze. "The balance must be restored. The Zelkari have disrupted it. Your kind has disrupted it." Julian shook his head. "The balance doesn't mean wiping us out. It means finding a way for both the ancient forces and the life on the surface to coexist. That's the balance the Earth seeks." The serpent growled, but its molten body flickered, as if uncertain. Julian pressed on, sensing that the creature's anger was born from fear of change, fear of losing the control it had maintained for millennia. "Look around you," Julian said, gesturing to the ocean floor, to the volcanic vents that pulsed with life and energy. "The Earth is evolving. The power you protect is part of that evolution, but it's not the only part. You're fighting against the very thing you claim to defend." The serpent's eyes glowed brighter, but its body trembled slightly, as if Julian's words were sinking in. "I am the Earth's guardian," it said, its voice quieter now, almost uncertain. "I protect its core." "You protect the Earth," Julian agreed, his tone gentle but firm. "But the Earth isn't just the core. It's everything. The land, the sea, the air, the life that has grown on its surface. You have to adapt, just as the Earth has. That's the only way the balance can truly be restored." For a moment, there was silence. The ocean floor was still, the volcanic vents calming as the tension in the air began to dissipate. Julian held his breath, waiting for the serpent's response. This was a gamble. He was challenging an ancient, powerful force to change its ways, to see the Earth through a new lens. The serpent's molten eyes flickered once more, and then, slowly, its massive form began to shrink. The molten energy that had once radiated with unbridled fury now dimmed, the serpent's body coiling into itself as it seemed to contemplate Julian's words. "You speak of harmony," the serpent said, its voice no longer filled with rage. "But harmony requires understanding. Your kind has disrupted the Earth's cycles." Julian nodded. "We have. But we can learn. Just as you have learned from the Earth, we can, too. You've been isolated for too long, cut off from the surface. It's time for you to see the bigger picture." The serpent's form shimmered, Its once massive body now no larger than a hill of molten rock. It regarded Julian with a newfound sense of respect, though there was still caution in its gaze. "I will consider your word, human," the serpent said. "But know this, the balance must be maintained. If your kind continues to disrupt it, I will not hesitate to return." Julian exhaled, his body relaxing as the tension began to lift. "I understand, and we will do everything in our power to restore that balance." The serpent nodded slowly, its molten eyes dimming as it sank back into the fissure from which it had emerged. The ocean floor rumbled softly as the ancient being returned to its slumber, leaving only the faint glow of molten rock in its wake. Above the ocean's surface, Captain Hayes and his team watched as the violent churning of the sea began to calm. The waves subsided, the ash in the air dissipated, and the sky began to clear once more. "Look," one of the soldiers said, pointing toward the horizon. "He's coming back." Hayes followed the soldier's gaze and saw Julian emerging from the water, his form glowing faintly with the Earth's energy. He moved with purpose, though there was an air of exhaustion about him, as if the battle had taken its toll. Hayes rushed forward, meeting Julian as he stepped onto the shore. "What happened down there?" Hayes asked, his voice filled with concern. "Are you all right?" Julian nodded, though his expression was somber. "I'm fine, but we were wrong. The threat wasn't just the Zelkeri. There's something much older and ancient force that's been guarding the Earth's core for millennia. It's been awakened, and it's not happy with what we've done." Hayes frowned. "So, what does that mean for us?" "It means we have a chance," Julian said. "But we need to change. The Earth's power is more than just raw energy. It's about harmony between the planet and the life that exists on it. If we disrupt that balance again, there's no telling what might happen." Hayes stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Understood. We'll do what we have to." Julian smiled faintly, though there was a weight in his eyes that hadn't been there before. He had faced an ancient power and convinced it to reconsider its purpose. But the Earth's future and humanity's was still uncertain. And deep beneath the ocean, the serpent watched and waited, its molten eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The days following Julian's encounter with the ancient serpent brought an eerie calm across the planet. The skies cleared, the oceans steadied, and the volcanic activity that had once threatened humanity's survival receded into the Earth. But this calm was fragile. Julian could feel it deep within the Earth's core. The planet was holding its breath, waiting to see if humanity had truly learned from the warnings it had been given. Julian spent much of his time in solitude, traveling from one end of the globe to the other, guided by the Earth's pulse. He sought out places where the balance was most fragile, where humanity's activities had stretched the planet's resources to the breaking point. With each stop, he felt the weight of his new responsibility, and with each step, he could hear the faint echo of the serpent's voice in his mind. The balance must be maintained. Captain Hayes, meanwhile, worked tirelessly to spread the message of Julian's encounter with the serpent and the importance of restoring the Earth's balance. His military background gave him the authority to command attention, but even he struggled to convince world leaders to act with the urgency the situation required. Old habits died hard, and the economic and political pressures that had driven humanity to exploit the Earth's resources for so long were difficult to overcome. "We don't have time for this," Hayes muttered one evening, pacing in the headquarters of the newly formed Earth Defense Coalition. The coalition was a hastily assembled group of scientists, military leaders, and policymakers, all dedicated to preventing another disaster like the Zelkeri invasion. But progress was slow, and Hayes' patience was wearing thin. "People are scared," said Dr. Elena Rodriguez, one of the leading environmental scientists in the coalition. "The Zelkeri attack shook them, but they're still focused on rebuilding. They don't understand the bigger picture yet." "They need to," Hayes replied sharply. "If we don't change how we treat this planet, the next threat won't be aliens from space, it'll be the Earth itself." Rodriguez nodded, but she looked troubled. "Julian's message is powerful, but it's hard for people to grasp. The idea that the planet is alive, that it's watching us, waiting for us to make the right decisions. It's a lot to take in. Hayes sighed. I get that. But we don't have the luxury of time. If we don't act now, it might be too late. While Hayes worked to push the world's governments toward a more sustainable path, Julian's journey took him to one of the most remote regions on the planet, the Arctic. Here, the Earth's pulse was faint, almost imperceptible, as if the frozen wasteland had long been detached from the vibrant energy flowing through the rest of the planet. But Julian knew better. Beneath the ice lay untapped reserves of ancient energy that had once powered the Earth's first great cycles. As he stood on the ice, Julian closed his eyes and reached out with his mind, connecting with the Earth's core. The cold air stung his skin, but the heat of the planet's molten heart warmed him from within. He could feel the slow, rhythmic pulse of the planet's tectonic plates shifting far below the surface, the same steady beat that had carried him through his battle with the serpent. But something else caught his attention, something faint but unmistakable. It was the same kind of disturbance he had felt before the serpent's awakening. But this time it was weaker, as though whatever was stirring beneath the ice had been dormant for far longer. Julian knelt down, pressing his hand to the frozen ground. The energy coursed through him, and a series of images flashed through his mind, ancient, fragmented memories of a time when the Arctic had been a lush, vibrant region, teeming with life. But those memories were quickly overshadowed by the weight of an ancient presence, one that had been buried beneath the ice for eons. He stood abruptly, his heart pounding in his chest. Something was coming, something old and powerful. The serpent had been a guardian of the Earth's core, but this was different. This was a force of destruction, a remnant of the Earth's chaotic past, and it was beginning to stir. Back at the Earth Defense Coalition headquarters, Hayes was poring over reports of strange seismic activity when his comm device crackled to life. "Hayes, it's Julian," came the voice on the other end, calm but urgent. "Julian," Hayes said, sitting up straighter. "Where are you? What's going on?" "I'm in the Arctic," Julian replied. "There's something here. Something ancient, buried beneath the ice. It's starting to wake up." Hayes felt a chill run down his spine. "You think it's another creature, like the serpent?" "I'm not sure," Julian admitted. "But whatever it is, it's connected to the Earth's cycles. I can feel its energy. It's destructive, chaotic. If it wakes up, it could destabilize the planet even more than the serpent." "Do you think it was triggered by the Zelkeri invasion?" Hayes asked. "Maybe," Julian said. "Or maybe it's just time. The Earth is constantly shifting, evolving. There are forces buried beneath the surface that even I don't fully understand. But I do know that if this thing fully awakens, we're in serious trouble." Hayes stood up, grabbing his coat. "I'll get a team up there right away." "No," Julian said quickly. "This is something I have to handle, alone." "Julian," Hayes began, but Julian cut him off. "You have to trust me, Hayes. I've already dealt with one ancient force, and this one, it's even more dangerous. Sending a team won't help. Just keep doing what you're doing, convince the world to change, to stop pushing the Earth to its breaking point." Hayes gritted his teeth, but he knew Julian was right. "All right, just be careful, okay?" "I will," Julian replied. "I'll be in touch when it's done." As Julian delved deeper into the Arctic, following the faint pulse of the ancient force beneath the ice, the temperature dropped even further. The wind howled across the frozen landscape, and the sky above darkened with heavy clouds. But Julian pressed on, his connection to the Earth guiding him toward the heart of the disturbance. Hours passed, and the feeling of unease grew stronger. The ground beneath his feet trembled with faint, rhythmic quakes, as if something deep below was stirring from a long slumber. Julian's breath fogged in the icy air, but the heat of the Earth's core kept him steady, his body alive with molten energy. Finally, he reached a massive glacier, its towering walls of ice reflecting the pale light of the Arctic sky. The quakes were stronger here, and Julian knew he had found the source of the disturbance. He pressed his hand against the ice, feeling the raw power of the ancient force trapped beneath it. The energy was chaotic, primal like a volcano on the verge of eruption. Taking a deep breath, Julian focused all his energy on the glacier, channeling the Earth's power into the ice. He could feel the ancient force resisting, pushing back against him, but he held firm. He had learned from his battle with the serpent that raw strength wasn't enough to overcome these ancient forces. He needed to guide the energy, to find the balance between chaos and order. The ground shook violently as Julian concentrated, his mind and body becoming one with the earth. The glacier began to crack, massive fissures spreading through the ice as the ancient force tried to break free. But Julian held his ground, refusing to let it escape. Suddenly, the ice gave way, and a massive eruption of energy burst forth from the glacier. Julian staggered back, his eyes wide as the ancient force emerged, a towering being of ice and fire, its form shifting and writhing as it roared to life. It was a primal force of destruction, a remnant of the Earth's chaotic past, and it had been awakened by the planet's recent turmoil. The creature's eyes burned with molten fury, and it turned its gaze toward Julian, sensing the Earth's power within him. For a moment, they stood locked in a silent standoff, the frozen wasteland around them trembling with anticipation. And then the battle began. The primal force of ice and fire towered before Julian, its immense form radiating both blistering heat and bone-chilling cold. It was unlike anything he had encountered before, an embodiment of the Earth's earliest, most chaotic days, when molten rock clashed with freezing air, shaping the planet's first landscapes. Now that ancient energy had returned, summoned by the disturbance the Zelkiri and humanity's relentless exploitation had caused. Julian steadied himself, feeling the Earth's energy flow through him, but he knew this battle wouldn't be like the one with the serpent. This creature didn't care about balance or the preservation of the Earth. It was pure destruction, a force that sought to reset the planet back to its most primal state. The creature moved first, slamming its molten fist into the ground. A shockwave rippled through the frozen landscape, causing the ice beneath Julian's feet to crack and splinter. He leaped back, summoning the Earth's molten energy to create a barrier between himself and the creature's devastating blow. The lava surged up in a protective wall, but the creature's attack shattered the barrier with ease, sending molten rock flying in every direction. Julian barely had time to react before the creature lunged again, its form shifting between molten rock and jagged ice. He ducked beneath its massive arm and rolled to the side, summoning a surge of lava from the ground. The molten energy shot upward, wrapping around the creature's body in an attempt to trap it. But the creature roared, its icy form rapidly cooling the lava, causing it to harden and crumble away. "This thing's unstoppable," Julian muttered under his breath, his mind racing. He couldn't overpower it, and trying to contain it with the Earth's molten energy was proving futile. The creature's dual nature, ice and fire, made it nearly impossible to pin down. If he focused on one element, the other would immediately counteract it. He needed a new approach. Julian closed his eyes for a moment, blocking out the chaos around him as he connected with the Earth once more. He could feel the planet's ancient rhythms, the ebb and flow of tectonic plates, the slow movement of magma beneath the surface. There was a balance to everything, even in the face of such raw destruction, and that's when it hit him. Balance. The creature wasn't just fire or ice, it was both, a force of nature that existed between extremes. If Julian could harness the Earth's ability to balance those forces, maybe he could neutralize it. Opening his eyes, Julian focused on the ground beneath the creature. Instead of trying to attack with pure molten energy, he called upon the Earth's natural stability, the steady, rhythmic flow of the planet's core, the subtle shifts of the plates. The ground beneath the creature began to tremble, not with violent force, but with a slow, deliberate movement. The creature hesitated, its molten eyes narrowing as it sensed the shift in energy. Julian raised his arms, guiding the movement of the tectonic plates beneath the ice. The creature stumbled as the ground beneath it shifted, throwing it off balance. Taking advantage of the moment, Julian concentrated on the space where the creature's fiery and icy energies met. He could feel the tension between them, the constant battle for dominance. And that's where he struck. With a surge of Earth's energy, Julian channeled the power of the planet's core, sending a wave of molten rock and freezing air toward the creature's center. The attack wasn't meant to destroy the creature, but to disrupt the delicate balance between its two forms. The creature roared in pain as the energies clashed, its body flickering violently between fire and ice. Julian pressed forward, guiding the Earth's energy to create a stabilizing force around the creature. The molten lava swirled with freezing air, trapping the creature in a vortex of balanced elements. The primal force fought back, its form writhing and twisting as it tried to break free, but Julian held firm. "You were never meant to exist in this world," Julian said through gritted teeth, his body trembling with the effort. "You're a relic of a time long past. The Earth has evolved, and so must you." The creature let out a deafening roar, its molten and icy forms battling for control. But the more it fought, the more the Earth's energy stabilized it. Slowly, the creature's movements began to slow, its massive form shrinking as the vortex of balanced energy continued to contain it. Julian could feel the creature's resistance weakening, its ancient power dimming as it was forced into harmony with the Earth's cycles. The once massive force of destruction was now little more than a flicker of molten energy and frozen air, swirling quietly within the vortex. With one final surge of power, Julian sealed the vortex, trapping the primal force within a pocket of balanced energy deep beneath the Earth's crust. The ground rumbled softly as the vortex settled into place, and then silence. Julian collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath. The battle had taken everything out of him, but he had done it. The primal force was contained, neutralized by the very balance it had once defied. The frozen landscape around him was eerily quiet, the air still thick with the aftermath of the battle. Julian could feel the Earth's relief, a sense of calm returning to the planet's core. The threat had been averted, but the cost had been high. He had tapped into the Earth's deepest energies, pushing his connection to the planet to its very limits. As he sat there, catching his breath, Julian sensed a presence behind him. He turned to see a faint shimmer in the air, an echo of the serpent's molten form, watching him from afar. "You have done well," the serpent's voice echoed in his mind, quiet and distant. "But the balance is fragile, remember that." Julian nodded, too exhausted to respond aloud. He knew the serpent was right. The balance between destruction and creation, between chaos and order, was delicate, and it was up to humanity to protect it. The serpent's presence faded, leaving Julian alone in the frozen wasteland. He rose to his feet, his body still humming with the Earth's energy, though it felt more distant now, as if the planet was allowing him to rest. He turned his gaze to the horizon, where the sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden light over the ice. The Earth was still, peaceful for the moment, but Julian knew that the battle for its future was far from over. Back at the Earth Defense Coalition headquarters, Captain Hayes paced anxiously as he waited for any word from Julian. It had been hours since their last communication, and the reports from the Arctic had been disturbing seismic activity, strange electromagnetic readings, and then nothing. Finally, his comm device crackled to life. "Hayes," came Julian's voice, tired but calm. "Julian," Hayes nearly shouted in relief. "What happened? Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Julian replied, though his exhaustion was evident. "The threat is contained, but it was close, Hayes. Too close." Hayes exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "What was it?" "An ancient force, something that's been buried beneath the ice for millennia. It's part of the Earth's chaotic past, and it nearly broke free. I managed to contain it, but it was a reminder this planet has powers we barely understand. We can't keep pushing it to its limits." Hayes nodded grimly. "We're doing what we can to spread the message, but it's slow going. People are still focused on rebuilding after the Zelkari attack." "They need to see the bigger picture," Julian said, his voice firm. "The Zelkari were just the beginning. There are forces on this planet that are far more dangerous, and they've been waiting for the right moment to awaken. If we don't change how we live, how we treat the Earth, they'll keep coming." "I know," Hayes replied, and I'll keep pushing. You just focus on resting up." Julian managed a tired laugh. "I'll try, but there's always work to be done." Hayes smiled faintly. "There is. But for now, thank you, Julian. You've saved us again." Julian's voice softened. "It's not just me, Hayes. It's all of us. We're in this together." As the comm line went quiet, Hayes stared out the window, watching the sun set over the horizon. The world had changed, and so had their understanding of it. The Earth was alive, and its future and humanity's depended on their ability to maintain the delicate balance that had been disrupted for far too long. Julian spent the next few days recovering in a remote village near the Arctic Circle. Despite the freezing temperatures and harsh winds, the isolation gave him the peace he needed to process what had happened. His battle with the primal force had left him drained not just physically, but spiritually. For days, he had been more connected to the Earth than any human ever had, and the experience had changed him in ways he still didn't fully understand. But now, as the distant mountains glistened under the pale Arctic sun, Julian knew one thing for certain: the Earth had not yet seen the last of its ancient forces. There were more remnants of the planet's chaotic past lurking beneath its surface, waiting for the right moment to awaken. The threat wasn't over, it had merely been delayed. A knock at his door pulled him from his thoughts. Julian stood and crossed the small room to open the door, finding Captain Hayes standing outside, bundled in thick winter gear. "Mind if I come in?" Hayes asked, his breath visible in the cold air. Julian nodded, stepping aside to let him in. "What brings you all the way out here?" he asked, curious. Hayes removed his gloves and rubbed his hands together to warm them. "I figured you could use the company," he said. "Plus, I wanted to give you an update in person." Julian smiled faintly, appreciating the gesture. "I'm guessing things haven't been easy." Hayes shook his head. "No, they haven't. We're making progress, but it's slow. World leaders are still more focused on rebuilding their cities than addressing the larger issue. They don't see the danger yet." Julian sighed, moving to sit by the small fire crackling in the hearth. "They will," he said. "Eventually." Hayes sat across from him, his expression serious. "The thing is, Julian, I don't know how much longer we have. You've faced two of these ancient forces, now the Serpent and that thing under the ice, and I'm starting to think there are more out there, if they keep waking up." "They will," Julian interrupted. "That's what worries me. The Earth's balance is fragile, and every time we push it further, we risk awakening something we can't control." Hayes leaned back in his chair, his face thoughtful. "You've talked a lot about balance, about maintaining harmony between the Earth and humanity. But how do we do that? How do we convince people to change when they're so set in their ways?" Julian stared into the fire, his mind racing. It was the question that had haunted him since the battle in the Arctic. How could they convince a world so focused on progress and consumption to pause, to reflect, and to restore the balance with the planet that had sustained them? "We need to show them," Julian said quietly. "Words won't be enough. People need to see the consequences of their actions. They need to understand that the Earth isn't just a resource to be exploited, it's alive, and it's fighting back." Hayes frowned. "Show them how?" Julian stood, pacing in front of the fire. "We need to make the Earth's power undeniable. We need to find the places where the balance is most fragile and restore them. If we can stabilize those areas, it will send a message. People will see that the Earth isn't just a passive observer. It's active. It's watching. And if we don't change, it will force us to." Hayes considered this for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I think you're right. But it's going to take more than just you and me. We'll need scientists, world leaders, and everyday people to get on board." Julian stopped pacing and faced Hayes. "We can start small," he said. "The Earth has shown me where the balance is weakest. We can begin by stabilizing those areas, one by one. As we restore the balance, the Earth will respond. It will show the world that it's alive, and that it's willing to protect those who protect it." Hayes stood, his determination clear. "Then let's do it. We've got the Earth Defense Coalition up and running. We'll start there, gather the best minds, the people who are willing to fight for this planet, and we'll make sure the rest of the world knows what's at stake." Julian smiled, feeling a sense of purpose rekindle within him. "I'll lead the charge. I'll use the Earth's energy to guide us to the places that need the most help. Together, we can stabilize the planet and prevent any more ancient forces from waking up." Hayes extended his hand. "Then we've got a plan." Julian clasped Hayes' hand firmly. "We do. And this time, we won't just be reacting, we'll be proactive." In the months that followed, Julian and Hayes worked tirelessly with the Earth Defense Coalition. They traveled across the globe, focusing on regions where the Earth's energy was most fragile, places where humanity's actions had pushed the planet to its breaking point. From the depleted rainforests of South America to the overmined mountains of Asia, they used Julian's connection to the Earth to stabilize the planet's energy and restore the delicate balance. Each time they succeeded, the Earth responded. Volcanic activity lessened, natural disasters became less frequent, and ecosystems began to recover. Slowly but surely, the world began to take notice. Julian's efforts, combined with the coalition's scientific expertise, sparked a global movement. People started to see the Earth not as a resource to be exploited, but as a living entity deserving of respect. Environmental policies shifted, governments began to prioritize sustainability, and humanity's relationship with the planet began to change. But it wasn't easy. The work was slow, and the dangers remained. Julian could still feel the ancient forces beneath the Earth's surface, waiting for their moment to rise again. But for now, the balance was holding. 1 year after the battle with the primal force in the Arctic, Julian stood at the edge of a restored rainforest in the heart of the Amazon. The trees, once scarred and broken by deforestation, had begun to thrive again, their leaves vibrant and full of life. The Earth's energy flowed through the forest, strong and steady, a sign that the balance had been restored. Captain Hayes stood beside him, looking out over the lush landscape. "We've come a long way," he said, his voice filled with quiet pride. Julian nodded, but there was a distant look in his eyes. "We have, but the work isn't done." Hayes glanced at him, sensing the weight in his words. "You still feel them, don't you? The ancient forces?" Julian sighed. "Yes, they're still out there, waiting. But for now, they're dormant. As long as we continue to restore the balance, they'll stay that way." Hayes crossed his arms, staring at the horizon. "And if we don't?" Julian's expression darkened. "Then the Earth will defend itself. It always will." Hayes was silent for a moment. Then he placed a hand on Julian's shoulder. "Well, as long as we've got you, I think we'll be all right." Julian smiled faintly. "It's not just me, Hayes. It's all of us." The two men stood in quiet reflection, watching as the sun began to set over the rainforest. The Earth had been pushed to its limits, but it had survived, and as long as humanity remembered the lessons they had learned, the planet would continue to thrive. But deep beneath the surface, the ancient forces slept, their power waiting to be called upon again. And Julian would be there ready to protect the Earth, no matter the cost. The sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting long shadows across the Pacific Ocean as Julian Miras stood on the deck of the Earth Defense Coalition's research vessel. The waters were calm, reflecting the orange and purple hues of the setting sun. But beneath that peaceful surface, Julian could feel something stirring. Since his last battle with the ancient forces of the Earth, Julian had become even more attuned to the planet's rhythms. The Earth's core pulsed through him, a constant reminder of the balance he had worked so hard to maintain. But now, there was something new, a disturbance in the oceans, subtle at first, but growing stronger by the day. Julian closed his eyes and reached out with his mind, connecting with the vast body of water below. The Earth's molten energy was familiar, but the ocean had its own voice, a deep, rumbling song that stretched back to the planet's earliest days. And that song was growing louder, more insistent. "They're waking up," Julian muttered to himself, though he wasn't entirely sure what they were. He opened his eyes as footsteps approached from behind. Captain Hayes joined him at the railing, his face lined with concern. "Still no sign of the Thavorians?" Hayes asked, his voice gruff. "Nothing yet," Julian replied. "But I can feel something. The oceans, they're not right." Hayes crossed his arms, his gaze drifting toward the horizon. "We've got bigger problems than strange ocean currents, Julian. The Thavorians are on their way, and we still don't know what they're after." The Thavorians had appeared in the solar system only days ago, sending a cryptic message to Earth. They claimed to be refugees, fleeing from a cosmic disaster that had wiped out their home systems. Their ships, enormous and sleek, hung in low orbit like silent sentinels, waiting for Earth's permission to land. But their presence had already caused disruptions. Strange electromagnetic pulses had been detected across the globe, affecting everything from satellites to power grids. And now the oceans were acting up, as if they, too, were reacting to the alien visitors. "I don't think the Thavorians are here to invade," Julian said, though his voice lacked confidence. "But their arrival is triggering something. The oceans are restless." Hayes snorted. "Restless oceans are the least of our concerns if those aliens decide to make a move." Julian shook his head. "You don't understand. The Earth's oceans are ancient, and they hold more power than we can imagine. If something in the deep is waking up, it's because the planet feels threatened. The Thavorians might not be attacking us, but their presence is disturbing the balance." Before Hayes could respond, an alarm blared from inside the vessel. Both men rushed into the control room, where Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the coalition's lead scientist, was hunched over a monitor, her face pale. "We've got seismic activity off the coast of South America," Rodriguez said, her voice tight with tension. "A massive shift in the ocean floor, something we haven't seen before." Julian's heart raced. "How massive?" Rodriguez pointed to the screen. "Big enough that it's creating a whirlpool, and it's growing." Julian and Hayes exchanged a look. The oceans were responding to the Thavorians' arrival, just as Julian had feared, and if they couldn't find a way to stabilize the situation, they would be facing more than just an alien refugee crisis. Miles above the Earth, the Thavorian fleet hovered in the stratosphere, silent and motionless. Their ships, sleek and metallic, shimmered in the sunlight, casting long shadows across the planet's surface. Inside the largest vessel, High Emissary Kordak watched the Earth's oceans through a holographic display, his eyes narrowing with concern. The Thavorians were a proud and advanced race, known throughout the galaxy for their mastery of technology and energy manipulation. But they had been forced to flee their home systems after a catastrophic event, a cosmic anomaly that had consumed entire star systems in a matter of days. Kordak had hoped that Earth, a relatively primitive planet by galactic standards, would be a safe haven for his people. But now, as he watched the disturbances in the planet's oceans, he realized that their arrival had triggered something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. "The planet is reacting to us," Kordak said, his voice low. One of his advisors, a tall, slender Thavorian named Lenara, nodded grimly. "The Earth's biosphere is more sensitive than we predicted. Our energy signatures are destabilizing the planet's natural systems." Kordak clenched his fists. He had promised his people a new beginning, a chance to rebuild after the devastation of their home worlds. But now it seemed that their very presence on Earth was threatening to cause more harm than good. "We need to find a way to mitigate the effects," Lenara continued. "If we don't, the planet's oceans could become even more volatile. The humans may not welcome us if we cause widespread environmental damage." Kordak's gaze hardened. "We don't have a choice. If we don't land soon, our fleet will be vulnerable to the anomaly's reach. Earth is our only hope." Lenara hesitated. "There's something else, High Emissary. Our long-range sensors have picked up unusual energy readings beneath the planet's surface, deep within the oceans." Kordak raised an eyebrow. "Energy readings? What kind?" Lenara's expression darkened. "Ancient. Older than anything we've encountered before." For a moment, Kordak was silent, his mind racing. He had known that Earth was home to untapped resources, but he hadn't anticipated that the planet's oceans held secrets of such magnitude. And if those ancient energies were being disturbed by the Thavorians' arrival, it could mean catastrophic consequences for both species. "We need to speak with the humans," Kordak said finally. "If their planet's oceans are reacting to us, we need to find a solution together. If we fail, this planet could become uninhabitable for both of us." Back on the research vessel, Julian, Hayes, and Rodriguez were huddled around a holographic display, watching as the whirlpool off the coast of South America grew larger by the minute. The seismic activity was increasing, sending shockwaves through the ocean floor and causing the surrounding waters to churn violently. "This isn't normal," Rodriguez said, her voice tense. "Whirlpools don't form this quickly, and certainly not on this scale. Something is driving this." Julian stared at the display, his mind racing. He could feel the Earth's energy shifting beneath the ocean, as if the planet was waking up to a threat it hadn't faced in millennia. The Thavorians' presence had triggered something deep within the Earth's waters, and it wasn't going to stop until balance was restored. "We need to get closer," Julian said suddenly. "I need to connect with the ocean directly." Hayes frowned. "You think that's a good idea? The last time you got involved with one of these ancient forces, you almost didn't make it back." Julian shook his head. "This is different. The oceans are more unpredictable than the volcanoes, but they're also more responsive. I can feel it. If I can connect with the Earth's water energy, I might be able to figure out what's causing this." Rodriguez glanced at the monitor. "You'd better hurry. At this rate, the whirlpool could destabilize the entire region's ecosystem. We're already seeing strange behavior in the marine life. Schools of fish are fleeing the area, and larger predators are surfacing in places they don't belong." Hayes sighed. "All right, but we're not sending you down there alone. We'll get a team together." Julian nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was waiting for him beneath the ocean's surface was something only he could face. The Earth's oceans had been quiet for so long, but now they were waking up, and they weren't happy. As the research vessel approached the edge of the whirlpool, the waters grew increasingly turbulent. Waves crashed against the hull, and the sky above darkened with storm clouds. Julian stood on the deck, his eyes fixed on the swirling waters below. He could feel the energy of the ocean pulling at him, like a living force calling him deeper. "Julian," Hayes called over the roar of the waves. "We're ready when you are." Julian turned, nodding to Hayes and Rodriguez, who were overseeing the launch of the submersible. The small, armored vessel would take Julian to the depths of the whirlpool, where he hoped to connect with the Earth's water energy and find out what was causing the disturbance. As he climbed into the submersible, Julian took a deep breath, centering himself. This wasn't just about stopping a natural disaster. Something far more ancient and powerful was at play, and he needed to understand what it was before it was too late. The submersible descended into the swirling waters, its lights cutting through the dark ocean as Julian felt the pressure increase around him. He closed his eyes, reaching out with his mind, trying to connect with the energy of the ocean. And then, Julian felt it, an ancient pulse, deep and powerful, rising from the ocean floor. It was not the subtle rhythm of the planet's core, but something far older, far wilder. The energy coursing through the water was chaotic, like a storm barely contained beneath the surface. It felt alive, yet alien, a force that had been dormant for eons, now stirred by the arrival of the Thavorians. The submersible continued its descent, the roar of the whirlpool surrounding Julian as he guided the vessel deeper into the abyss. The display showed they were nearing the ocean floor, but it wasn't like anything Julian had expected. Instead of the usual rocky seabed, there was a gaping chasm, black as night, stretching far beyond the submersible's lights. The abyss seemed to pulse with its own energy, radiating waves of power that Julian could feel even through the reinforced hull. As they neared the chasm's edge, the submersible shuddered violently. Alarms blared inside the vessel, and the lights flickered as something massive moved below. Julian squinted through the viewport, trying to make sense of the shadows shifting in the depths. Then, for just a moment, he saw a massive, serpentine shape coiling through the darkness, its scales shimmering faintly in the light. His breath caught in his throat. It was no ordinary sea creature. This was something else entirely, something ancient and powerful, older than any force he had ever encountered. The creature's presence sent a wave of energy rippling through the water, and Julian could feel the Earth's oceans responding. The chaos of the whirlpool above was not a random phenomenon. It was being driven by this ancient force, as if the ocean itself was awakening to defend against a perceived threat. But was the threat the Thavorians, or something deeper? Julian reached out with his mind, trying to connect with the Earth's water energy. The pulse of the planet's core was still there, faint but steady, but now it was overpowered by the chaotic energy emanating from the chasm. He focused, trying to stabilize the conflicting forces, but the deeper he reached, the more overwhelming it became. Suddenly, the submersible jerked violently, and a loud crack echoed through the hull. Julian's heart raced as the controls flickered and went dark. The submersible was caught in the powerful current of the whirlpool, being pulled toward the chasm's edge. "This is bad," Julian muttered, trying to wrestle control of the vessel. But the power of the current was too strong, and the submersible was being dragged into the abyss. Just as the submersible teetered on the brink of the chasm, the massive shape below surged upward. The serpentine creature wrapped itself around the submersible, its coils squeezing the hull with terrifying force. Julian could feel the pressure increasing, the metal groaning as it began to buckle under the strain. But then, something unexpected happened. The creature's energy pulsed through the vessel, but instead of crushing it, the force stabilized. Julian felt the ancient power surge through him, not as an attack, but as a connection, like the Earth's oceans were communicating with him, recognizing him as something more than just an intruder. The serpent's presence filled his mind, its thoughts alien and primal, but there was a strange intelligence there, something that understood the balance of the planet in ways Julian had only begun to comprehend. "Why do you disturb the deep?" A voice echoed in his mind, ancient and thunderous. Julian gasped, his thoughts racing. "I'm here to understand," he responded mentally, struggling to keep his voice steady. "The Earth is reacting to the arrival of an alien race. I need to know why." The serpent coiled tighter, though its presence in his mind was not hostile, merely curious. "The stars brought with them a disruption. You are the planet's guardian. Why do you allow this chaos?" Julian swallowed hard. "They claim to be refugees. They're not here to invade, but the Earth is reacting to them, especially the oceans. What are you?" The creature's coils loosened slightly, and Julian felt its energy ripple through the water like a slow, rolling wave. "I am the keeper of the abyss. I am the guardian of the ancient waters, the depths where life and death meet. The surface does not concern me, but the disturbance in the deep does." Julian's pulse quickened. "Is the disturbance caused by the Thavorians?" There was a long silence before the serpent answered, its voice deep and contemplative. "The stars carry with them an old wound. Something from beyond your world has seeped into the oceans, into the Earth itself. It is not only the stars that threaten this balance. There is something deeper, something older than even I." Julian's breath caught in his throat. "What is it?" "The stars flee not from disaster, but from a pursuer," the serpent responded. "Something vast and ancient follows them, a force that hungers for the power that sleeps beneath the surface. The Thavorians have awakened it." Julian's mind raced. The Thavorians weren't just refugees, they were being hunted, and whatever was chasing them had the power to disturb even the deepest parts of the Earth. This force, whatever it was, posed a threat far greater than Julian had anticipated. "If it reaches the Earth, this planet will be torn apart," the serpent said, its voice low and grim. "The oceans will rise to meet it, and nothing will survive the storm that follows." Julian's heart pounded in his chest. He had thought the Thavorians were simply disturbing the Earth's ecosystems, but this was far more dire. If this ancient force reached Earth, it wouldn't just disrupt the balance, it would destroy everything. "What can I do?" Julian asked, his voice trembling. The serpent's eyes glowed in the darkness, its coils shifting around the submersible. "You must find the source of this disturbance and stop it before it reaches the surface. But beware, this force is not of this world. It seeks to consume, to absorb the power of the Earth, and it will not stop until the planet is hollow and dead." Julian shuddered, the weight of the serpent's words sinking in. The Thavorians had unknowingly brought a cosmic predator to Earth, one that threatened to devour the planet itself. "I'll stop it," Julian vowed, his voice firm. "Whatever it is, I won't let it destroy the Earth." The serpent's coils loosened further, and Julian felt the submersible rise slightly, no longer caught in the whirlpool's pull. "Go, guardian of the surface. Find the source of the disturbance and protect the balance. But know this, the ocean remembers, and if you fail, the depths will rise to claim what the stars have left behind." With that, the serpent released the submersible, and Julian felt the vessel surge upward, carried by the ocean's currents. He was still shaken by the encounter, but he knew what needed to be done. The Thavorians had unwittingly brought a cosmic threat to Earth, and if it wasn't stopped, the planet would be consumed. As the submersible surfaced, Julian was greeted by the sight of the research vessel looming above, its lights cutting through the dark waters. Hayes and Rodriguez stood at the edge of the deck, waiting anxiously as the submersible was hoisted aboard. The moment the hatch opened, Hayes was there, pulling Julian out of the cramped vessel. "What the hell happened down there?" he demanded, his eyes wide with concern. "We lost contact after you descended into the whirlpool." Julian shook his head, still trying to process what he had learned. "It's worse than we thought," he said, his voice grim. "The Thavorians didn't just disturb the oceans, they've awakened something ancient, something dangerous." Rodriguez frowned. "What do you mean?" "There's an ancient force in the deep, something older than the Earth itself. The Thavorians are being hunted by it, and now it's here, in our oceans. If we don't stop it, it'll destroy the planet." Hayes cursed under his breath. "And how exactly are we supposed to stop an ancient cosmic force?" Julian met his gaze, his expression determined. "We need to speak to the Thavorians. They know more than they're letting on. If they've been running from this thing, they might have a way to stop it." Hayes sighed, running a hand through his hair. "All right, but I don't like the idea of trusting aliens who might have led this thing right to us." Julian nodded. "Neither do I. But if we don't, the oceans will rise, and we won't stand a chance." High above the Earth, the Thavorian fleet floated in silence, unaware of the chaos unfolding beneath the planet's surface. But deep within their command ship, High Emissary Kordak was growing increasingly uneasy. The energy readings from the Earth's oceans had grown more erratic, and their sensors had detected something moving deep within the water, something vast and powerful. "High Emissary," Lenara said, approaching with hurried steps. "We've received a communication request from the humans. They're asking for an audience." Kordak frowned. "What do they want?" "They claim to have information about the disturbance in the oceans," Lenara finished, her voice tense. Kordak's frown deepened. He had suspected that the humans would eventually realize the full extent of the situation. But if they were contacting him directly, it meant that things were worse than anticipated. The oceans were not just reacting to the Thavorians' presence, they were responding to something far more ancient, something the Thavorians themselves had feared for generations. "Prepare a shuttle," Kordak said, his voice cold. "I will meet with them in person." Lenara hesitated, her expression wary. "Are you certain, High Emissary? The humans may not fully understand what they're dealing with. Revealing too much could—" "We don't have time for caution," Kordak interrupted, his eyes flashing with frustration. "The disturbance is growing. If we do not address it soon, both our people and theirs will be caught in the devastation. This planet cannot withstand the full force of what follows us." Lenara nodded reluctantly, then turned to relay the orders. Kordak watched her go, his mind racing. The Thavorians had fled across the galaxy, seeking refuge from the cosmic entity that had consumed their home worlds. They had hoped that Earth, a planet rich in untapped power, would be a safe haven. But now, the ancient force had followed them here, drawn to the same energy that made the planet so valuable. And the humans, they had no idea what was coming. On the deck of the research vessel, Julian stood with Captain Hayes and Dr. Rodriguez, watching the Thavorian shuttle descend from the sky. The alien craft was sleek and silver, glinting in the sunlight as it hovered above the ocean before gently lowering itself onto the ship's landing pad. Julian's mind was still reeling from his encounter with a serpent in the depths of the ocean. The creature's words echoed in his thoughts. Something from beyond the stars had awakened, something that sought to devour the earth itself. And now, standing before the Thavorians, Julian knew that these aliens were the key to understanding the full scope of the threat. The shuttle's hatch opened, and High Emissary Kordak emerged, flanked by two tall, silent Thavorian guards. His presence was commanding, his silver robes billowing in the sea breeze as he approached the humans with slow, deliberate steps. "You requested an audience," Kordak said, his voice deep and resonant. "Speak." Julian stepped forward, feeling the weight of the moment. "We've encountered something in the ocean," he began, choosing his words carefully. "Something ancient. It told me that the disturbance in the oceans isn't just caused by your arrival, it's something much worse." Kordak's expression remained neutral, but Julian could sense the tension in his stance. "Go on." "The creature said that your people are being hunted," Julian continued, "by an ancient force, something that's been following you across the galaxy. It's here now, in our oceans, and if we don't stop it, the Earth will be destroyed." For the first time, Kordak's composure faltered. His eyes narrowed, and he glanced at his guards, as if silently communicating with them. Then, he turned back to Julian, his voice low and grave. "You speak of the Devourer." Julian frowned. "The Devourer?" Kordak nodded slowly. "It is an ancient force, older than most civilizations in the galaxy. It consumes worlds, stripping them of their energy and leaving them barren. We have been fleeing it for centuries, moving from system to system, trying to find a place where its reach cannot follow. We had hoped that Earth would be that place, but it seems that even your planet's natural defenses are not enough to deter it." Hayes stepped forward, his arms crossed. "So you brought this thing here, and now it's threatening to destroy the Earth. That's just great." Kordak's gaze hardened. "We did not bring it here intentionally. The Devourer seeks out planets with great reserves of energy, your Earth's core, its oceans, its ecosystems. It was only a matter of time before it sensed your world." Julian shook his head, trying to make sense of the situation. "But the Earth's oceans, they're responding to the Devourer. It's like the planet knows it's under threat." "The Earth is a living planet," Kordak said. "Its energy is unique in the galaxy. That is why the Devourer is drawn to it. But your planet's defenses are only delaying the inevitable. The Devourer will consume everything if we do not act." Rodriguez, who had been silent until now, spoke up, her voice tight with urgency. "What exactly are we dealing with? What does this thing look like? How do we stop it?" Kordak's expression darkened. "The Devourer is not a creature in the conventional sense. It is a force of nature, a cosmic entity that feeds on the life force of planets. It manifests as a storm, a vortex of energy that consumes everything in its path. Once it takes hold of a planet, there is no escape." Julian felt a chill run down his spine. The whirlpools, the strange seismic activity, it all made sense now. The Devourer was already affecting the oceans, and if they didn't act soon, the storm would engulf the entire planet. "Then how do we stop it?" Julian asked, his voice tense. "There has to be a way." Kordak hesitated, glancing at his guards before answering. "There is a way, but it is dangerous. The Devourer feeds on energy, and the only way to stop it is to cut off its supply. That means using the Earth's own energy, its core, its oceans, to create a counterforce strong enough to disrupt the Devourer's feeding cycle." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "You're talking about using the Earth itself as a weapon?" "In a sense, yes," Kordak said, "but it is risky. If the energy balance is disrupted too severely, it could destabilize the planet's core. You may stop the devourer, but you could also destroy the Earth in the process. Julian's heart sank. The solution was a gamble, a dangerous one. But they didn't have a choice. If they did nothing, the devourer would consume the Earth. If they tried to stop it, they risked destroying the planet themselves. "How do we do it?" Julian asked, his voice firm. "How do we create this counterforce?" Kordak gestured toward the ocean. "The answer lies in the depths. The Earth's oceans are key to its energy balance. You have already felt the ancient forces stirring below. If we can harness that power and direct it at the devourer, we may have a chance." Julian nodded, already feeling the weight of the task ahead. "Then we'll do it. I'll go down into the depths again and connect with the Earth's water energy, but I'll need your help. You know more about this force than we do." Kordak inclined his head. "Very well, I will assist you in stabilizing the energy. But be warned, if we fail, there will be no second chance." Julian looked to Hayes and Rodriguez, both of whom nodded, though their faces were pale with apprehension. The stakes couldn't be higher. "Let's do this," Hayes said, his voice resolute. "We've saved the planet before. We can do it again." The next day, preparations were underway. The Earth Defense Coalition had gathered all available resources to assist Julian and Kordak in their mission. They had positioned a research vessel directly above the growing whirlpool off the South American coast, where the devourer's influence seemed strongest. Julian stood on the deck, staring out at the churning waters below. He could feel the power of the ocean pulsing through the depths, growing more erratic by the hour. The planet was fighting back, but its defenses were faltering. The devourer was relentless. "You ready for this?" Hayes asked, walking up beside him. Julian nodded, though his heart was heavy. "I don't think we have a choice. It's now or never." Hayes clapped him on the shoulder. "Just don't get yourself killed down there." Julian smiled faintly. "I'll try not to." Nearby, Kordak was overseeing the final preparations, coordinating with his team to ensure that their energy equipment was in place. The Thavorians had brought advanced technology that could amplify and channel the Earth's energy into a focused counterforce, but it would require precision and careful timing. As the submersible was lowered into the water, Julian took one last look at the surface, knowing that this could be the last time he saw it. The mission ahead was dangerous, and there were no guarantees of success. But if they didn't try, the Earth and everyone on it would be consumed. With a deep breath, Julian climbed into the submersible, joining Kordak inside. The hatch sealed, and the vessel began its descent into the abyss once more. The deeper they went, the stronger the energy became. Julian could feel the weight of the ocean pressing down on them, the water teeming with power that had been dormant for millennia. As they neared the chasm where Julian had first encountered the serpent, he braced himself for what was to come. "We're nearing the point of convergence," Kordak said, his voice steady but laced with tension. The submersible descended deeper into the abyss, the churning waters around them dark and unwelcoming. Julian's pulse quickened as they approached the chasm. The ancient serpent's presence had faded, but the power in the depths had grown stronger, an ominous sign that the devourer's influence was tightening its grip on the planet. The display in front of Julian flickered, showing unstable energy readings. The abyss seemed to pulse with life, the waters around them trembling as if anticipating what was about to come. The deeper they went, the more chaotic the energy became, swirling like a storm barely contained within the depths. "The Earth's energy is unstable," Kordak muttered, checking the controls. "We need to begin the process of creating the counterforce now, before it's too late." Julian nodded, closing his eyes and reaching out with his mind. He focused on the energy of the ocean, feeling the waves of power surging around them. It was wild, chaotic, and dangerous, but there was still a thread of balance, a connection that ran deep within the planet's core. If he could harness that balance and channel it toward the surface, they might have a chance to disrupt the devourer's feeding cycle. "We're approaching the chasm," Kordak said, his fingers flying over the controls. "The equipment is ready. Once we activate the device, it will amplify the Earth's natural energy and direct it upward, creating the counterforce we need. but we'll have only one shot. If we fail—" "We won't fail," Julian interrupted, his voice firm. "We can't." The submersible descended into the chasm, the darkness closing in around them. Julian felt a deep sense of unease settle over him as they neared the center of the disturbance. The ocean's energy was in turmoil, torn between the Earth's natural defenses and the Devourer's insidious pull. Suddenly, the submersible shuddered, and the display blinked wildly as something massive moved in the shadows ahead. A low, rumbling sound echoed through the water, like the growl of a sleeping giant awakening. "There," Kordak said, pointing at the display. "The core of the disturbance." Julian's breath caught in his throat as the display revealed the source of the chaos, a swirling vortex of black energy, pulsing with destructive power. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, a storm of raw, cosmic force that threatened to tear the Earth apart from within. The Devourer had begun its feeding cycle. "We have to hurry," Julian said, his voice tight with urgency. "Activate the device." Kordak nodded and pressed a series of buttons on the control panel. The Thavorian equipment hummed to life, sending a pulse of energy through the submersible and into the surrounding waters. Julian could feel the Earth's energy responding, shifting as it was amplified and directed toward the vortex. But as the counterforce began to build, the waters around them grew more violent. The vortex pulsed with dark energy, resisting the Earth's attempt to push it back. The pressure inside the submersible increased, the hull groaning under the strain. "We're losing stability," Kordak warned, his hands flying over the controls. "The Devourer is fighting back." Julian gritted his teeth and closed his eyes, focusing on the connection he shared with the Earth. He could feel the planet's core, the molten energy that had sustained it for billions of years. But now, that energy was at risk of being consumed by a force that sought to devour everything in its path. "We need more power," Julian muttered, his voice strained. "The Earth's energy isn't enough." Kordak's eyes widened. "More power? If we push the system any further, we risk destabilizing the planet's core. The Earth itself could be destroyed." Julian shook his head. "There's no other way. We have to take the risk. If we don't, the Devourer will win." With a deep breath, Julian reached out with his mind, tapping into the Earth's deepest reserves of energy. He could feel the molten core of the planet surging beneath him, a wellspring of power waiting to be unleashed. But if he drew too much, the consequences could be catastrophic. He had no choice. Julian focused, channeling the Earth's core energy through his connection to the planet. He felt the raw power flood through him, coursing through his veins like liquid fire. It was overwhelming, more than he had ever experienced before, but he held on, directing the energy toward the Devourer. The submersible shuddered violently as the Earth's energy surged upward, crashing into the vortex of dark energy. For a moment, the waters around them went still, as if the entire ocean was holding its breath. Then, with a deafening roar, the vortex exploded outward, sending shockwaves through the abyss. The Devourer's feeding cycle had been disrupted, its connection to the planet severed. But the force of the explosion was too much for the submersible to withstand. The hull groaned under the pressure, and alarms blared as cracks began to form in the reinforced glass. "We have to get out of here," Kordak shouted, frantically adjusting the controls. Julian nodded, but he was still connected to the Earth's energy, unable to sever the bond without destabilizing the counterforce they had created. He could feel the planet's core pulsing through him, the power threatening to consume him if he didn't release it soon. But there was something else, another presence, deep within the Earth, watching: the Serpent. "You have done well, Guardian," the Serpent's voice echoed in Julian's mind, calm and ancient. "But the balance must be maintained. Release the Earth's energy, or all will be lost." Julian gritted his teeth, his body trembling under the strain of the power coursing through him. He knew the Serpent was right, but if he released the energy too soon, the Devourer might still have a chance to recover. "Julian, now!" Kordak yelled, his voice breaking through the chaos. With a final, desperate surge of effort, Julian released his connection to the Earth's core. The energy that had built up inside him dissipated, flooding back into the planet's depths. The submersible jolted violently as the pressure around them began to stabilize, the waters calming as the counterforce took hold. The Devourer's vortex was gone, its energy dissipating into the surrounding ocean. The Earth had fought back, and for the moment it had won. But the cost had been great. Hours later, Julian, Kordak, and the rest of the crew stood on the deck of the research vessel, watching the sun rise over the horizon. The waters were calm now, the whirlpool gone, and the seismic activity had subsided. "We did it," Rodriguez said softly, her voice filled with relief. "We actually did it." Julian nodded, though he felt a deep exhaustion settling over him. The battle with the Devourer had taken more out of him than he had realized. His connection to the Earth was still strong, but he knew that the balance remained fragile. The Devourer might have been stopped, but the damage done to the planet's energy systems would take time to heal. Kordak approached, his expression unreadable. "You have saved your planet, Julian Miras, but the danger is not gone. The Devourer may have been driven back, but it will return. It always does." Julian turned to him, his eyes weary. "Then we'll be ready." Kordak inclined his head. "I hope you are. The Thavorians have faced the Devourer for centuries, but we have never been able to defeat it for good. You may be the first planet to survive an encounter with it, but the cost will be high." Julian sighed, looking out at the ocean. "I know, but this planet is resilient. It's survived more than most can imagine." Kordak's gaze softened slightly. "Indeed. Perhaps there is more to Earth than even we understood." Hayes joined them, his expression a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "So, what happens now? You aliens planning to stick around, or are you heading off to the next system?" Kordak chuckled softly. "We will leave, Captain Hayes. The Earth is not safe for us. The Devourer will continue to hunt us, and we do not wish to bring further danger to your planet." Julian nodded. "That's probably for the best." Kordak extended his hand, an unfamiliar gesture for a Thavorian, but one of respect. "Thank you, Julian Miras. You have saved not only your world, but ours as well. We will not forget." Julian shook his hand, feeling the weight of the moment. "Safe travels, High Emissary, and good luck." With that, Kordak and his guards returned to their shuttle, which soon ascended into the sky, joining the Thavorian fleet. The alien ships hovered for a moment longer before turning and disappearing into the vast expanse of space. As they vanished from sight, Julian felt a sense of closure. The Devourer had been stopped, and for now, the Earth was safe. But he knew that the balance was still fragile, and there would always be new challenges, new threats to the planet's survival. But as long as he remained vigilant and connected to the Earth, there was hope. Julian turned back to Hayes and Rodriguez, who stood beside him, their faces light by the morning sun. "Let's regroup and assess the damage," Julian said, feeling the weight of responsibility settle back onto his shoulders. "We need to monitor the oceans closely and ensure that the energy levels return to normal. We can't afford to let our guard down, not after what we've faced." Hayes nodded, his expression serious. "We need to spread the word about what happened. The world needs to know that we faced the Devourer and that the oceans are alive, reacting to threats we can't even see." "Agreed," Rodriguez said, glancing toward the horizon. "And we need to focus on restoring the balance we've disrupted. We're on borrowed time, and we can't let complacency set in." As they made their way back to the control room of the research vessel, Julian couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The Thavorians may have left, but the cosmos was vast and unpredictable. If there was one thing he had learned, it was that danger could emerge from the most unexpected places. In the days that followed, the Earth Defense Coalition worked tirelessly to monitor the oceans and ensure that the Devourer's influence was truly gone. Scientists and environmentalists collaborated to assess the health of the ecosystems, while Julian guided the teams, tapping into the Earth's energy to help stabilize the oceanic balance. Reports came in from around the globe, ecosystems beginning to recover, marine life returning to their natural habitats, and even some coastal communities expressing gratitude for the ocean's newfound stability. It felt good to see the positive impact of their efforts, and Julian took solace in knowing that they were on the right path. But he still sensed an undercurrent of tension, as if the earth was holding its breath, waiting for something more. Every time he reached out with his mind, he could feel the ancient forces beneath the surface, the same forces that had once threatened the planet. One evening, as Julian stood on the observation deck of the research vessel, he gazed out at the ocean, feeling the rhythm of the waves beneath him. It was a peaceful scene, yet it felt fragile. He sensed the weight of the ocean, the power it held, and the mysteries that still lingered in the depths. A familiar presence approached, and Julian turned to see Hayes walking up beside him. "What's on your mind?" Hayes asked, his tone casual, but with an edge of concern. "I can't shake the feeling that something else is out there," Julian admitted, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "The devourer may have been repelled for now, but there are still forces we don't understand, forces that have been lying dormant beneath the surface for ages." Hayes sighed, leaning against the railing. "You think the Thavorians might come back? Or that they've brought something else with them?" Julian shook his head. "I don't know. The Thavorians seem genuine, but there's so much about the cosmos we still don't understand. If there are other entities out there, other threats, we need to be prepared." Just then, Rodriguez joined them, a stack of reports in her hands. "You two look deep in thought. What's going on?" "Julian's worried about what's still lurking beneath the surface," Hayes said. "He thinks we might have more to deal with." Rodriguez raised an eyebrow, her expression thoughtful. "Well, you're not wrong to be concerned. While we've seen improvements in the ecosystems, we're still monitoring the energy fluctuations, and some reports indicate unusual seismic activity in regions we haven't previously encountered." "More disturbances?" Julian asked, turning to her. "Where?" "Southwest of the Caribbean," Rodriguez replied, handing over the reports. "There have been some strange readings, almost as if the ocean is responding to something new. We need to check it out." Julian took the reports, scanning the data as he felt the weight of responsibility settle on him again. "Looks like we don't have a choice. If something is stirring in the Caribbean, we need to investigate. It could be connected to the devourer, or it might be a new threat entirely." Hayes nodded. "All right, let's mobilize the team. We'll head out to the Caribbean and see what's causing these fluctuations." As the research vessel sailed toward the Caribbean, Julian couldn't shake the sense of urgency that gnawed at him. The journey was filled with anticipation, and every passing hour heightened his awareness of the ocean's energy. He could feel the waves pulsing beneath the ship, a rhythm that hinted at something deeper, something ancient. When they finally arrived, the waters were calm, but Julian could sense the undercurrent of energy swirling beneath the surface. He stood at the edge of the vessel, eyes fixed on the horizon as Rodriguez and Hayes worked alongside their team to analyze the data. "What do you feel?" Rodriguez asked, glancing up from her console. "Something is there," Julian replied, focusing his energy. "I can sense it, but it's strange. It feels different from the devourer. It's not hostile, but it's powerful." As they prepared the submersible for another dive, Julian turned to his team, determination etched on his face. "Whatever this is, we need to approach with caution. The last thing we want is to stir up whatever force lies beneath." Hayes nodded, his expression serious. "Agreed. Let's gather as much data as we can before we go in." With everything in place, Julian and a small team, including Rodriguez and Hayes, descended into the depths of the Caribbean once more. The submersible glided smoothly through the water, the lights light the dark ocean as they descended deeper. As they reached the ocean floor, Julian felt a surge of energy, a pulse that resonated with his own. The waters around them shimmered, and he sensed the presence of something ancient, something waiting to be discovered. "Keep an eye on the readings," Julian instructed, his eyes scanning the display. "We need to find out what's causing the fluctuations." The team moved cautiously, navigating the rocky terrain of the ocean floor. Strange formations jutted out from the ground, reminiscent of coral reefs, but larger and more intricate. It was a hidden world, vibrant and alive, teeming with colors and shapes that Julian had never seen before. Suddenly, a bright flash erupted from beneath them. The submersible shook violently, alarms blaring as the control panel flickered. "What was that?" Hayes shouted, gripping the console. "Something just released a burst of energy," Rodriguez exclaimed, her eyes wide with fear. Julian closed his eyes, reaching out with his mind to connect with the energy. It surged through him, and he could feel the ancient force that lay beneath. The ocean was alive with power, wild and untamed, but there was also a sense of urgency, as if the water itself was pleading for their understanding. "We need to stabilize this energy," Julian shouted, his voice rising above the chaos. "If we don't—" But before he could finish, the submersible was engulfed in light, the ocean around them swirling in a cyclone of color and energy. Julian could feel the force pushing against them, threatening to tear the vessel apart. "Hold on," Kordak's voice echoed in his mind, a reminder of the power they had encountered before. Julian focused, channeling the Earth's energy to create a protective barrier around the submersible. The cyclone intensified, swirling around them like a tempest, but Julian held firm, directing the energy outward. He felt the pull of the ocean beneath him, the power begging to be released, but he also felt the threat looming just beyond their grasp. "Something is trying to break free," Rodriguez yelled, her hands gripping the console as the lights flickered violently. "If we don't stop it—" With a final surge of determination, Julian unleashed the energy he had been holding back, sending a wave of power through the ocean. The cyclone roared as it collided with the ancient force rising beneath them, and in an instant, the water erupted. The submersible shot upward, propelled by the force of the energy release. Julian's heart raced as they broke the surface, the vessel bobbing violently in the churning waters. He glanced out the viewport, and his eyes widened in disbelief. From the depths of the ocean, a colossal creature emerged, a magnificent being of water and light, its form shifting and shimmering like the surface of the sea. It was as if the ocean itself had taken on a physical form, a guardian of the depths risen to greet them. The creature paused, hovering just above the waves, its massive presence filling the air with a sense of peace. Julian could feel the energy radiating from it, a harmonious balance that seemed to counteract the chaos that had surrounded them. "This is incredible," Rodriguez breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "Is it a guardian of the ocean?" Hayes asked, his voice filled with awe. Julian nodded slowly, feeling a connection forming. "It's the ancient force we sensed. It's not a threat, it's a protector." As the creature gazed down at them, Julian felt its energy wash over him, filling him with warmth and understanding. "You have awakened me," a voice echoed in his mind, deep and resonant. "I am the guardian of the abyss, the protector of the oceans. I have watched over this world since time began." Julian's heart swelled with relief. "We didn't mean to disturb you." "We didn't mean to disturb you," Julian spoke, his voice steady despite the awe swelling within him. "We were trying to stop a great threat, a cosmic entity that seeks to consume this world and others." The guardian of the abyss regarded Julian and his team, its form shifting with the currents as it spoke. "The devourer is an ancient force, one that consumes not only worlds, but the very essence of life itself. It hungers for power, for energy, and it was drawn to you, to your people." Julian nodded, remembering the panic and chaos that had engulfed the ocean before. "We've encountered it before. The Thavorians fled from its grasp, and we believed that their presence would awaken it. We acted to disrupt its feeding cycle, but we did not anticipate that it would lead us to you." "Your actions were wise," the guardian said, its voice like rolling waves. "But you must understand, the balance of the ocean is delicate. The devourer has left scars upon your world, and it will not be easily quelled. It has found a way to reach this realm, and it will not stop until it has consumed what it desires." Rodriguez stepped forward, her expression a mix of determination and curiosity. "What can we do? How can we stop it for good? The Guardian's gaze shifted toward the horizon, its massive form shimmering with energy. To stop the devourer, you must awaken the heart of the ocean. There lies a temple beneath the waves, a place where the energy of the earth converges with the oceans. It is there that you can harness the power needed to banish the devourer from your world. A temple? Hayes asked, his brow furrowed. Where do we find it? Follow the currents, the Guardian replied, its voice echoing with the sound of crashing waves. It will guide you to the place of convergence. But heed my warning, the path is fraught with peril. The devourer will sense your approach, and it will not allow you to interfere. Julian felt a shiver run down his spine. They had come so far, and now they stood at the precipice of a greater challenge. We're ready to face whatever it takes to protect the Earth. You are brave, guardian of the surface, the Guardian said, its tone respectful. But bravery alone will not be enough. You must rely on the bonds you have formed with your people, with the Thavorians, and with the Earth itself. Only together can you hope to restore the balance. With that, the Guardian began to shift and move, drawing Julian's attention to the ocean behind it. The path is before you. Trust in the ocean's wisdom, and it will lead you to the heart of the temple. But be prepared. The devourer will come for you. With a sudden surge, the Guardian vanished into the depths, leaving Julian and his team floating in the now calm waters of the Caribbean. Julian felt a mixture of exhilaration and apprehension. They had a direction, a purpose, but they were also running out of time. The threat was looming, and if they didn't act quickly, everything they held dear would be at stake. All right, Julian said, turning to Hayes and Rodriguez. We need to prepare for this. I have a feeling the Guardian will lead us to where we need to go, but we must stay vigilant. The devourer won't take kindly to our interference. Let's get the submersible ready and gather any resources we can, Hayes replied, already moving toward the control room. If the Guardian said the path is fraught with peril, we need to be prepared for anything. Rodriguez quickly followed, pulling up schematics and data on the temple the Guardian had mentioned. I'll start researching any references to ancient oceanic temples or structures. There might be records we can use to help us navigate. Julian took a moment to breathe, the weight of what lay ahead settling over him. They were venturing into the unknown, guided by a creature of ancient power, and they had no idea what awaited them beneath the surface. But one thing was certain, they couldn't turn back now. After a flurry of preparations, the research vessel set off again, following the ocean currents that the Guardian had indicated. Julian stood at the bow, his eyes scanning the horizon, feeling the pull of the water beneath him. The ocean had its own energy, and he was learning to read its signs, its whispers. The sun was beginning to dip low in the sky when they finally reached the coordinates provided by the Guardian. The waters around them shifted, swirling in a pattern that suggested a hidden energy source. According to the readings, we're right above it, Rodriguez said, looking at the monitors with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Prepare the submersible, Julian instructed, feeling a mix of nerves and anticipation. We need to get down there and see what we're dealing with. As the submersible was lowered once more, Julian and his team climbed inside, the familiar weight of the ocean pressing down on them as they descended into the depths. The darkness enveloped them, but Julian felt the energy pulsing beneath the surface, guiding them deeper. The display flickered, revealing strange formations below, glowing coral-like structures that pulsed with a light that seemed to resonate with the ocean itself. Julian's heart raced as they approached, recognizing that these were the signs of the temple the Guardian had mentioned. There it is, he breathed, awestruck by the sight before him. The temple was a magnificent structure, unlike anything he had ever seen. It appeared to be made of some kind of biolite material, glowing softly in the dark water. Intricate patterns adorned its walls, and the energy radiating from it was palpable. As they neared the entrance, Julian felt a rush of power surge through him, connecting him with the ocean's depths. The whispers of the water grew louder, urging him forward. "Get ready," Julian said, his voice steady. "Whatever is waiting for us inside, we need to be prepared." The submersible hovered at the entrance, a large archway framed by the glowing coral. As they passed through, the water inside the temple felt different, charged with energy, electric in its intensity. Suddenly, alarms blared within the submersible, the console flashing with warnings. As the energy reading spiked, Julian's heart raced. "Julian," Rodriguez shouted, "something is approaching. It's massive." He turned to look at the monitors just as a colossal shadow loomed in the distance, moving rapidly toward them. It was the Devourer, its dark energy swirling like a storm, angry and relentless. "Seal the hatch," Hayes shouted, his voice filled with urgency. Julian felt the surge of fear and adrenaline as he tried to focus. "We have to stabilize the energy in the temple. We can't let the Devourer breach it." As the submersible's hatch sealed, Julian concentrated on the energy pulsing through the temple, channeling his thoughts to awaken its defenses. The glowing structures around them began to pulse brighter, responding to his call. "Hold on," Rodriguez shouted as the submersible shook violently. The Devourer was close, its energy crashing against the temple like a tidal wave. In that moment of chaos, Julian focused all his energy on the temple, invoking the ancient powers that lay within. The glowing structures erupted with light, sending waves of energy outward. The Devourer screamed, its form writhing as it collided with the temple's protective barrier. "Now!" Julian shouted, directing the energy toward the Devourer. He could feel the ancient force trying to break through, but he held firm, refusing to let it breach the sanctum of the temple. The energy surged forward, crashing against the Devourer and forcing it back, but the ancient entity was relentless. The battle raged on, a clash of cosmic forces that shook the very foundations of the temple. As Julian continued to channel the temple's energy, he sensed a presence. The Guardian of the Abyss had returned. "You are strong, Guardian of the Surface. Together, we will banish the Devourer." The Guardian's energy intertwined with Julian's, amplifying the power he wielded. With one final surge, Julian directed the combined forces against the Devourer, pushing it back with all his might. The Devourer roared in anger as it was forced to retreat, its form swirling with dark energy as it struggled against the tide of light. But Julian and the Guardian pressed on, unyielding in their determination to protect the Earth. And then, with one final push, the Devourer was driven back into the depths, its dark form dissolving into the shadows of the ocean. The energy of the temple stabilized, and the waters around them calmed, returning to their natural rhythm. Breathless, Julian collapsed against the control panel, his body trembling with exhaustion. "We did it," he gasped, the weight of what they had accomplished settling over him. The Guardian's presence pulsed warmly around him. "You have proven your strength and resolve, Guardian of the Surface. The balance has been restored for now. But remember, the Devourer will always seek to consume." Julian nodded, the gravity of the moment sinking in. They had faced an ancient force and prevailed, but the battle was not over. The cosmos was vast, and there would always be new threats. As the submersible ascended toward the surface, Julian felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. The battle with the Devourer had drained him, both physically and mentally. Yet there was also a profound sense of relief. They had managed to repel an ancient cosmic force that threatened not only the Thavorians but the very fabric of Earth itself. The waters above parted as they breached the surface, sunlight flooding into the cabin. Julian squinted against the brightness as he and his team emerged into the warm Caribbean sun. The ocean was calm, the chaos that had engulfed them just moments before now a distant memory. Hayes was the first to speak, breaking the silence. "We did it, Julian. We actually did it." His voice was a mixture of disbelief and joy, reflecting the shared relief they all felt. Rodriguez leaned back in her seat, exhaling deeply. "I didn't think we'd make it out alive. That was intense." Julian smiled faintly, still catching his breath. "Thanks to the Guardian and the power of the temple, we were able to stabilize the energy and send the Devourer back into the depths." As they emerged from the submersible, the rest of the crew greeted them with cheers and applause, relief evident on their faces. They had faced the unimaginable and returned victorious, but Julian's mind still lingered on the Guardian's words. The balance has been restored for now. They gathered on the deck, the sun warming their skin, but Julian couldn't shake the feeling that the victory was only temporary. As long as the cosmos existed, threats would always emerge. He turned to Hayes and Rodriguez, a sense of determination returning to him. "We need to ensure that we're ready for whatever comes next," Julian said, his voice steady. "The Devourer was only one part of a much larger puzzle. We can't afford to be complacent. We have to prepare for future threats, learn from this encounter, and educate others about the power that lies within our oceans." Hayes nodded, his expression serious. "You're right. We need to mobilize the coalition and spread the message. The Earth is alive, and it's up to us to protect it." Rodriguez stepped forward, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "I'll start working on a comprehensive plan for monitoring the oceans and strengthening our defenses. We can collaborate with marine biologists, environmental scientists, and even the Thavorians if they're willing to share their knowledge." The energy in the air shifted as Julian felt a renewed sense of purpose. The world was changing, and they were at the forefront of that change. The lessons learned from their encounters, the balance between humanity and nature, the importance of understanding the ancient forces at play would guide their actions moving forward. As they looked out over the ocean, the waves lapping gently against the vessel, Julian allowed himself a moment of hope. The waters were calm now, a reminder of the harmony that could be achieved when people worked together for the greater good. "We're not just guardians of the Earth," Julian said, his voice carrying across the deck. "We're stewards of a living planet, and together we'll ensure that the balance is maintained, not just for ourselves but for generations to come." The crew erupted into cheers, and in that moment Julian felt a sense of unity and strength among them. They had faced the unknown and emerged victorious, but their journey was far from over. As the sun began to set over the Caribbean, casting golden rays across the water, Julian stood at the ship's bow, gazing into the horizon. He could feel the heartbeat of the Earth resonating within him, a steady rhythm that reassured him of the connection he had forged with the planet. But even as he reveled in the victory, he remained aware of the challenges that lay ahead. There were still mysteries in the depths, threats that would test their resolve, and ancient forces that might one day awaken once more. But Julian was ready. He had seen the power of the Earth, felt the strength of its oceans, and understood the delicate balance that sustained life. With his team by his side, he was determined to protect the planet, ensuring that it remained a haven for all its inhabitants. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, Julian felt a sense of peace wash over him. The oceans were alive, and he was part of that life, a guardian of the surface, protector of the depths, and steward of the world. And together, they would rise to meet whatever challenges awaited them, ready to defend the Earth against the stars.